It is really bizarre to look back on the past year and consider that there was a time when my life was simple. I have a different life today, and I would argue I'm a different person. I have to eat every night at specifically 6 p.m. If I don't, there are consequences. That doesn't sound all that weird. People eat at 6 p.m. all the time, some earlier, some later. I can't do that. It has to be exactly 6 p.m. And if I don't, there are consequences. You wouldn't think there'd be, but there is. And yeah, it is as unusual as it sounds. It started about a year ago. My family was taking me out to celebrate finishing my education as a dental technician. I had technically already worked in the field for some time, mostly internships. But now I had it all on paper. I was officially done, and I could get myself a real job. I had a couple of places lined up. My mom was really excited about it. She booked a table at a pretty pricey downtown restaurant. You need to book it at least 1 or 2 months in advance, especially if you want a weekend or evening slot. Not only did she do that, she booked it with space to spare. Mom, Dad, my girlfriend Amy, my older brother, and my grandparents. One big outing. I was a bit nervous about them meeting Amy. It was their first time, but I figured it'd be fine. We got there around 5:30 on a Friday. I'm not gonna out the restaurant. I think they're closed now, but it was this nice downtown place, slightly elevated with an outdoors terrace. They had 2 bars and these big booths for parties for up to 8. When we got there, they showed us inside, asked us to take off our shoes, and sat us down at the table. First thing they did was go person by person and wash our hands. At the table, the appetizer was meant to be eaten with your hands. That was the kind of vibe we were walking into. Just for contrast, I'm not into expensive stuff. The whole reason I got into dentistry at all was because I used to be anxious about tongues. I started reading about them just to kinda demystify them. And all of a sudden, it became an interest. Then I went from tongue to teeth. But food-wise, I'm a ramen noodle kinda guy. I'm not really about the whole washing my hands with eucalyptus water thing. We had a couple of drinks, some laughs, some appetizers. They had this shrimp thing they served with dry ice that made the whole table look like a cloud. The chef was apparently a big thing. I think I've seen him on the TV a couple of times. Let's just call him Chef Mike for reference. It'd be too easy to identify him if I gave you the real first name. We saw him a couple of times that day. A lot of people were running in and out of the kitchen, and if you listened closely, you could hear someone yelling in the other room. As the clock closed in on 6 p.m., a waiter put down a plate right next to me. No one else got a plate like that. It was a kind of zesty halibut with haricot vert and asparagus foam. When I looked up, I realized I'd been served by Chef Mike himself. For the birthday boy, he smiled. "It's not my birthday," I smiled back, "but thank you." "Pardon my assumption. May I ask the occasion?" The others at the table chimed in, my grandparents talking about how inventive I was as a child. My mother straightened her back and started talking about my excellent oral health. Amy was clinging to my arm, a bit overwhelmed about the whole outing. She's not a fan of strangers. Chef Mike just smiled at me. "Then you must have a refined palate," he said. "Please, it's on the house." A clock chimed in the background. 6 p.m. on the dot. I took a bite. I'm not gonna say the halibut was the best thing I've ever had. It wasn't. It was good though. Buttery smooth, with just enough texture to stick to your tongue. The foam did a lot of heavy lifting. It was just a couple of bites, but I really enjoyed it. There really wasn't much more to it. We had a lovely dinner and dessert. Then, as we called it a night, Amy and I took an Uber back to our place. That's when I noticed something curious. Someone had sent me money. $80. Now, it's not a lot of money, but there was no name or note attached to it. I figured it was my parents wanting to give me a little extra to go out with Amy, but I wasn't sure. I chalked it up to miscommunication and sent out a, "Hey, thanks for the $80" in the family group chat. No one responded. I didn't really think about it. The next day, I was back to slurping up a pack of ramen noodles while doing paperwork. To be a bit extra fancy, I added some fresh bell peppers. I was halfway through an article when I got a notification. $65. No name or note attached. Strange. Not just that I got money again, but it was a different amount. I sent out another message in the family group chat, thinking maybe my grandparents were the ones who sent it. Maybe they thought the first didn't go through. I could only speculate, but the group chat stayed silent. Over the next few days, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, there were days when I didn't get any money at all. I did get a couple more deposits though, but only on days when I had dinner at exactly 6 p.m. It was the only common denominator. Ramen with bell peppers, I know, twice in a week, got me another $65. Fried chicken and rice got me $70. Add some curry sauce and have it again the next day, I got $73. The sums would differ, but I would only get something on the days where I ate at exactly 6 p.m. The thing is, it was fast and consistent. I could be sitting at home, chilling in front of the TV, and I'd get a notification, but only if I was having dinner at 6 p.m. This brought me to a couple of uncomfortable realizations. First off, the sums would differ depending on what I ate, meaning there was some kind of rating system. And second of all, and maybe more importantly, someone could tell when I was eating. Someone was, somehow, observing me eat. This triggered all kinds of paranoid responses in me. I would stop eating out of spite. I would bring Amy over and ask her to check outside for someone watching me through the windows. I borrowed a strong magnet from a local magnet fisher to check if I got any bugs on me. All of it turned out nothing. I think the only thing I managed to do was convince Amy that I was getting paranoid. She wasn't too happy about it, but I think that's just because she worries. She's a warrior. One day, I decided to test it all further. I locked myself in the bathroom. I turned off the lights and hid behind the shower curtain. I had microwaved a waffle with some vanilla ice cream in a bowl. I took little bites at exactly 6 p.m. and listened for a notification on my phone. My hands were a bit shaky. I was so focused on listening for that sound that every creak and groan of the apartment building sent sparks into my chest. As soon as I finished the bowl, the phone beeped. $45. I couldn't even see my own hands. Unless someone was using infrared or sonar, there was no way they could see or hear what the hell I was doing. Something wasn't adding up. I kept experimenting over the next few days. I tried to test the boundaries of what counted as dinner. Soft foods like drinks and slushies and marmalade didn't count. Neither did snacks like chips or crackers. It had to be something substantial and traditional. I tried going the other way around. I got this really nice cut of beef from a local butcher. I asked Amy to help prepare it, seeing as she's a bit more of a cook than I am. She put some real love into that thing, using a sort of truffle glaze and serving it with roasted potatoes. I asked her to share it with me, but she insisted I had it on my own. She was sort of invested into this experiment too. She'd seen the deposits. I sat down at this little table. I had a heated cloth napkin, a glass of red wine, and ate by candlelight. Once I finished, I checked my phone. $1,200. This wasn't just a creepy experiment anymore. This was real money. Rent money. Amy freaked out when I showed her, dancing around the kitchen like she'd won the lottery. "Tomorrow I'll make homemade ciabatta and a chili," she said. "If this is what one steak gets us, what'll 3-course meal do?" "But where is it coming from?" I asked. "Why are we getting it?" "Why don't you just ask? If there's someone watching, then clearly they're listening." She had a point. Amy had some last-minute business to deal with the next day, so I ended up making some hot dogs and mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy, just the powdered stuff right out of the box. But as soon as I sat down, I had an idea. I took a bite and spoke into the empty room. "If you can hear me, add 50 cents to the next deposit." I'd never gotten anything less than full dollars, so yes, that would catch my attention. I tried watching a show as I ate, but I kept getting this pounding in my chest whenever I thought about being watched. What was the point in watching me eat? And why at 6 p.m.? I finished my meal and put the plate away. As I turned on the dishwasher, my phone chimed. $21.50. Someone was listening. Testing this further just made it stranger. I had some Indian takeout food on the bus, and I still got a deposit. They were still watching me when I was on the move, as long as I had a proper meal. I tried dragging dinner out for 2 hours. I still got a deposit, but much less than usual. I could be eating alone, or with friends, or at a restaurant. It didn't matter. Someone knew what I was doing, and they were grading it on a scale. I started asking questions. 50 cents for yes, 25 cents for no. I already knew they could hear me, so that was already settled. "Can you see me?" 50 cents, yes. "Do I know you?" 25 cents, no. "Do you want to hurt me?" 25 cents, no. I was so fascinated that it started taking up a lot of time. I would make charts and weigh my options on what to ask. We quickly realized that it didn't work if Amy asked. It had to be me. But when I asked if it knew that Amy was there, I got a very clear yes. I started to notice a couple of patterns in the payments. Home-cooked meals regularly got bigger deposits. Also, eating alone. White wine was a big no-no, but red wine was a yes, especially if chilled. I was slowly mapping another person's palate, and I have to admit, it was pretty amazing. A little more salt, another $5. A little less butter, that's another $3. All the while, I was asking questions. Whoever was watching me had a hard time answering what or who they were. We had to narrow it down to what they weren't. They were not a regular person, not a demon or mythical creature, not an alien. I couldn't get a clear enough answer, but I managed to understand that they used to be a person, not a ghost though. They were clear about that, 25 cents clear. I came up with this system of multiple choice answers. I would write up answer sheets with increments of 10 cents each. That's how I figured out where they came from. First day I asked what continent they lived on. I got 30 cents, correlating with my North America answer. The next day, it pointed me to the United States. Makes sense, that's where I am. The third day, I asked them to write out the first letter of the state code. I got 19 cents, meaning S. The next day, I got 4 cents, meaning D. SD, South Dakota. Pretty far away. I tried to narrow down exactly where they were at, but after a while, they stopped answering. Turns out, they didn't know for sure. It was east of the river, that much I figured out. I got the impression that whoever I was communicating with wasn't entirely sure either. Some days, the question I asked took longer to respond to, and there'd be a delay before I got the deposit. All the while, I was raking in some pretty good money. I was averaging $150 a day just from sticking to this dinner schedule. Amy didn't ask too many questions. We could really use the money if we wanted to get a bigger place, but I had to start asking some uncomfortable questions. I couldn't get over what kind of deal I was actually making. Why would someone go to such lengths just to have me follow a strict schedule? And it was then, almost 2 months after that celebration dinner, that I got a visitor. It was a regular Tuesday. I had started my new job just a couple of weeks prior, so I was more tired than usual when I got home from work. All the tension of getting to know a new workplace just collapsed from my shoulders. But she had prepared a recipe for me to make to ensure we got most of our daily mystery deposit. But that's when I got a knock on the door. Now, I get visitors every now and then. My parents, friends, Amy's friends. But this was someone I hadn't seen at my door before. Looking through the peephole, I realized I was looking at none other than our local celebrity chef, Chef Mike. I opened the door, scratching my head. "Hey," he said, dropping the TV persona. "Remember me?" "Yeah, sure," I said. "What are you doing here?" "Have you been getting the payments?" "You know about them?" "Yeah," he nodded. "I get them sometimes too. I just gotta cook the right thing." I invited him in, and we got to chatting. Chef Mike told me all about the setup. About once a week, he got a deposit if he served that halibut dish to someone. They didn't have to order it. He would pay for it. It just had to be prepared in a certain way and offered at a certain time and date. As Chef Mike explained it, he wandered around my kitchen, making sure not to touch the counter. It was kinda filthy. Amy doesn't really do dishes, and I'm not much for scrubbing. Chef Mike gave me a long look. "I stopped getting payments after you came by. I think our benefactor has taken a liking to you." "Benefactor? Is that what it is?" "I honestly don't know," he shrugged. "But whatever it is, it kickstarted my career. I've made some serious money with this arrangement." "Just from cooking halibut?" "It's not just cooking a halibut. It's cooking it to perfection. It's cooking it over a process that has taken me years to calibrate. No one else can do it. It's unique." He pointed a finger at me. I sat down. Chef Mike had come by to cook me dinner. He wasn't getting payments for halibut anymore, so he figured the benefactor had taken a liking to me. He wanted to try cooking for me to see if it paid off. It sounded almost threatening, like he wasn't asking. He wanted me to agree to him coming by 2 times per week, cooking things he knew would get us a lot of money. I wouldn't have to send him anything. He got deposits of his own. Somehow, our benefactor knew that not only was I having dinner at that exact time, but he also knew exactly who prepared it. And I mean, what could I say? I was getting paid to enjoy a gourmet meal 2 times a week. How can that be a bad thing? I wasn't being tricked here. I saw the whole thing from start to finish, no matter if he made a paella or chicken frittata. I'd see the whole thing, no tricks. So yeah, I agreed. Amy would have killed me if I didn't. She got all the leftovers she wanted. That, and she was a bit of a closeted Chef Mike fan. She followed his YouTube channel. Things changed rapidly after Chef Mike and I shook hands on this deal. He got all new kitchenware for me and had a firm come by to clean. He put in this new hood over the stove and put in a wall-mounted spice rack. All custom jars, no labels necessary. On days when he came by, he would sometimes bring an assistant or a sous chef. He was taking it seriously. I can't count how many unnamed people came and went through my kitchen during those days. Some didn't even look like chefs, more like mercenaries. Deposits kicked up significantly. My max payout was somewhere around $3,200. It never dipped below $300. Still, having him around was nerve-wracking. He had an absolutely shit temper, and he would blow up at Amy all the time. She would just be excited to have him there, and he would cuss her out for staring. It was heartbreaking watching her go from all excited to withdrawn. After a while, she would avoid coming out at all on days when he was there. All the while, I was still trying to understand our benefactor. I asked him to spell out his name, but all I got was N and O. 14 cents, 15 cents. Then I decided I had to ask some big questions, something that would take a long time to answer, but that I had to know. Despite knowing it might take weeks to get the full picture, I painstakingly made a schedule to ask a question I couldn't stop thinking about. How can you see me? It took 8 days to get a complete answer. Every day I checked the deposit and the corresponding number of cents. I put up one post-it a day until the answer was staring at me. 21, 18, 5, 25, 5, 19. UREYES. Your eyes. I tried eating with my eyes closed, but that didn't seem to affect it at all. That confused me. Even if this thing could somehow experience things through my eyes, that didn't explain why it wanted me to eat. I started getting strange messages not related to the questions I asked. Letters that wasn't a response to anything I asked. I could ask a yes or no question and get 4 cents, a D. Over the weeks that followed, I filled my fridge with all kinds of strange messages, all written on colorful post-its. Good taste, best tongue, more salt. Chef Mike shared that he was getting messages too, but he hadn't figured out they had a meaning yet. It was only when I pointed it out that he realized he had started getting sends. He hadn't gotten those before. He wrote out all the sends he'd received in a number sequence and had me translate it while he cooked. This one says, "Can't see," I said, pointing to a series of post-its. This other one says, "Can't touch." So he can't touch and can't see, and he lives in South Dakota, and he sees things with other people's eyes. Chef Mike shuddered. He didn't like that. Amy was standing quiet in the corner, keeping her head down. He says I have a good tongue. The best, I added. What do you think that means? Well, Chef Mike sighed. Over the years I've worked with him, he made me perfect that one halibut dish as a sort of calibration. Maybe he was looking for someone to enjoy it the right way. But how does he know that I do that? He shrugged. See through your eyes. Taste through your tongue. Taking all that heard into account, I decided to dive deeper into another question. Why specifically at 6 p.m.? Why was that so important? The answer I got was as simple as it was infuriating. Dinner. I asked what happened before that and why it couldn't be 5 p.m. Gym. The benefactor had a schedule. Work, gym, dinner, woman, sleep. I got this impression of someone living vicariously through others, maybe literally. How else can you explain someone knowing I'm eating strawberries and cream in the dark and not just flushing them down the toilet? I shared my findings with Amy, all the post-its, the talks with Chef Mike, the experiments, the questions. I showed her my conclusions and suspicions, drawing it out on my iPad like I was mapping a conspiracy theory. Red lines from one circle to another, dates, answers. I had printed out pages of deposits and highlighted every cent. Just in case, I'd checked if the full dollar amount was anything too. It wasn't. At that rating, it was getting intricate. The benefactor had a very particular palate. It enjoyed beef the most. Well done, surprisingly. Grilled was a no-go, but it enjoyed the barbecue and various glazes. There was a little upshoot whenever I had a pleasant appetizer, and even more if I finished with a dessert. Chef Mike managed to break the record with a $4,100 deposit after serving me a 4-course meal. But man, it was awkward. I was just sitting there savoring it while Amy watched from the other side of the room. I could tell she was having second thoughts about this entire thing. I couldn't blame her, but we were talking about big money by now. This was daily income in the potential thousands. Finally, at one point, she just flat out asked me about all of it. We were driving home from the grocery store and she had me pull over. It was almost dinner time. We'd gotten stuck in traffic. I was a bit stressed, but I did as she asked. She put her hand on my shoulder. "I think we should stop," she said. "We got so much from this. There's gotta be a problem with it. I don't feel comfortable doing this." "It's a lot of money," I agreed. "But can we afford to stop?" She nodded. We got a lot, I know, and we can put that to good use. But when's enough enough? Didn't you want to be a dental technician? I am a dental technician, I insisted. You spend more time on your charts and recipes, she said. That's all your time. It's income in the thousands, Amy. Thousands. And what did he get from you that's worth that kind of money? I didn't have an answer. My tongue felt dry. The clock was almost 6 p.m. I leaned back and smacked my seat. Amy recoiled a little, and I reached out to apologize. We were okay. It was just a lot. And I mean, yeah, she was right. I was being paid for something I didn't understand, and it was a lot of money. If I can't understand it, how can I consent to it? I decided to swallow my pride and agree with her. So that day, I skipped dinner, and for the next week, I kept that up. It was a bit strange stepping away from a strict schedule, and Chef Mike wasn't happy about it. He went back to making that halibut dish, looking for someone new to appease the benefactor. I would get these occasional messages like, "No one yet," and "You sure you still out?" The message that stuck with me the most was just, "Do you know how lucky you are?" I stopped responding after a while. Amy was doing a lot better. We started eating together again, and we could be a bit more spontaneous. It was a load off my shoulders, but I would still catch myself wondering at times. Whenever 6 p.m. rolled around, was something looking through my eyes? Was it tasting my tongue? Had it moved on? There were no more deposits. It sucked not to have that income, but it was a strange thing to rely on to begin with. And I won't lie, it was convenient as hell. But there's something uncomfortable to it. I can't put my finger on it. But after 2 weeks of stepping away from the deal, something changed. I lost my job. I'm not saying I was the perfect employee, but I was doing a lot better now that I didn't have any distractions. It came out of nowhere. There were no mass layoffs or anything. It was just me. And on the same day as some nameless security goon is carrying my stuff to my car, I get a text from Amy. She lost her job too. All of a sudden, that income is looking like a lifesaver. But I couldn't help but think, what if that's the point? What if this was orchestrated? How far can this benefactor reach? That night, Amy went to see her sister. The two of them are really close, and she needed some alone time. Meanwhile, I made spaghetti and meatballs, and I sat down to eat at exactly 6 p.m. I remember sitting there at the kitchen table, eating in silence, looking at my iPad across the table. I'd written a question. Did you get us fired? 50 cents, yes. 25 cents, no. Every bite felt wrong, like someone was watching me from inside my mouth. Like there was someone else sitting in the same space as my body, savoring me like a goddamn juice box. I felt like I was putting on a show, making myself into a canvas to be painted on. But I finished the meal. There was a deposit later that night, $480.50. That's a yes. It got us fired. I didn't tell Amy about it. She thought we had gotten away from that whole ordeal, and now it was threatening to pull us back in. I wanted to give her some peace of mind, so I decided I was going to do something about it. I had a plan to get this benefactor out of our lives, once and for all. One evening, while she was out, I sat down at 6 p.m. with a new plan. I was going to make the benefactor turn away from me forever, and I could see only one way of doing that. I had lined up a plate with orange juice, toothpaste, diced onions, and mayonnaise. That and a spoon. I'd prepared an empty bucket next to me. My heart was making backflips as the clock crossed over to 6 p.m. When it did, I dug in and ate until I couldn't eat anymore. I ate and I got violently ill. There were no deposits that night. For a few days, it seemed to work. I could eat at 6 p.m. without getting a deposit. It actually lightened my mood a lot. I didn't feel watched anymore. I think Amy noticed it too. She seemed a bit more at ease. Dinner time had become this unspoken stigma between us, but we'd started to look past it. We could joke about it, plan a little outing. We might even have dinner at 6 p.m. We moved back into a better routine. I took down the post-its from the fridge. I deleted the document with all my findings. I'll admit, I wasn't sure about that one. There's no harm in keeping a file on your computer. But then again, if I wanted to fully commit, I couldn't keep that stuff around. After much deliberation, I cleared it out. Things were looking up. I got a new job interview. Amy and I were looking at bigger apartments, hoping to find something within our price range. Not for now, but for when we both got back on our feet. But things don't always turn out like you want. It was the middle of the afternoon, and I'd spent my day talking to some old classmates. I was waiting for a response from a recruiter who'd shown some interest. I got out of my car at around 4 p.m., bringing some groceries along. The front door was open, so I figured Amy was at home. I did what I always did. I spoke out loud about my day. "Mark got a new job?" I said. "Sounds like it wasn't just me that's been laid off." No response. "I got some turkey breast. I figured we could make some." I looked down at my grocery bag. Turns out, someone had switched it. This wasn't what I'd bought. But for that to happen, they must have been in my car while I checked my phone. Looking up, there was a man in my living room. He was about 6'3", slim shoulders, thick horn-rimmed glasses, buzz cut, gray dress coat, simple blue jeans. Something in my blood froze when I saw him. I think I've seen him at Chef Mike's place. It was like coming face to face with a lion. All kinds of strange details just burned into my head. The way he laced his shoes, the silver ring on his left index finger, the slight hint of a scar on his neck, the tinted blue sunflower on the commercial rolling in the background. We just stared at each other for a second. I counted my breaths, trying to keep my brain from spiraling. I was making 100 plans at once, but they were all incomplete. Run, scream, shout, talk. Why aren't I talking? Do something. He burst into a sprint. I dropped my groceries and got about 5 steps before he caught my neck and pushed me down. I felt something cold, metallic and heavy push against the back of my skull. "Not a word," he said. "Not a single goddamn word." The world turns black with a blindfold. I tried to listen for details, count my steps. There were more people, and they were trying to disorient me. They put a hood over my head and spun me around, pushing me to the ground a couple of times. I couldn't figure out the directions we were going. They threw me into a car, a big one by the sound of it. No one was talking, but I figured they were at least 3 people. 2 up front, 1 in the back. The car ride was over 40 minutes, but we took a lot of turns. We might have been going in circles for a while. Once we came to a stop, they pulled me out and kept driving. I never even saw the car. Still, not a word from either of them. I was pulled into a building and escorted down some stairs. A cellar. I was pushed into a cheap chair that scraped against an uneven stone floor. Then there was a voice. "Time. 4:48. Clear out." People left the room. Another chair squeaked as someone sat down across from me. They leaned in, making sure the chains on my hands were secured to the table. Let me tell you about my job. The silence was unbearable. I could barely hear him over my own breathing. "I've had a job for 6 years," he said. "Best job I've ever had. Before this, I was ready to bite a bullet. I had no purpose, no income, nothing." He tapped something against my head. Then one day, a man walks past me, and I look at him a little longer than I usually do. He looks weird, has a feel to him, And all of a sudden, I get $20, just like that. So you know what I do? He leans in. I look a little closer. I follow him a little longer. Another $20. And you know what I find? This guy is a freak. He does some things that grown men ain't supposed to do. Things that hurt people. Good people. He leans back. Something metallic lands on the table. So instead of turning my gun on myself, I turn it on him. And I shit you not, 10 minutes later, I'm looking at a 5-figure payout out of goddamn nowhere. He taps the heavy object with his fingertips, spins it a little. Now I got a job, a very serious job. And I've learned to listen very, very well. And I don't ask questions. We sat there for a full hour. He had a wall clock that made this needlessly loud ticking noise so I wouldn't forget the seconds. I tried to calm my nerves and settle my breathing, but he would do something to constantly keep me on edge. I lost track of time completely after a while, and he was more than patient. Someone knocked on a door downstairs, a heavy door, metal, reinforced. The man got up from his chair. "That's your cue," he said. "It's showtime." I instantly recognized the voice as the door creaks open. Amy. They drag her down in chains, kicking and screaming. She yells my name. Not that I can do anything. It's like reaching for a teddy bear. She's just screaming to get the fear out, and it aches me not to be able to do anything. The man has a gun. Something small clings onto the table in front of me when he pulls off the blindfold. I'm sitting in a dark basement. There are 8 men in the room, all armed with submachine guns. They have chained Amy to the wall. They got her purse tangled up, so they cut the strap off with a Bowie knife. They're all masked, black masks, carbon fiber with felt over the eyes. They have different skin tones and build. No visible tattoos. There are 6 plates in front of me. A bacon and water chestnut appetizer, Caesar salad with a mild cheese, a lightly fried halibut with hollandaise sauce and collard greens, rice balls with spicy mayonnaise served with steak tenderloin, a turkey burger slider, and a small cup of chocolate lava cake for dessert. 3 perfectly placed glasses of red wine, water, and white wine. Amy is screaming herself to death. I can hear her voice breaking. I realize one of the men are behind me, and he's holding something. I can hear a leather strap just inches from the back of my head. He's pointing something at me. Once the clock turns to 6 p.m., one of the men nodded at me. Bon appetit. I take my time with the dishes. I don't want to give them an excuse to shoot me in the back of the head. It all tastes like salt anyway. I must have bitten my tongue when they attacked me. The wine burns my tongue and my eyes water. A little blood drizzles out of the corner of my lips. Amy is a mess. She's on her knees repeating please over and over like a mantra. She is terrified of strangers, and the claustrophobia isn't helping. No one is budging. They're not even looking at her. I take bite after bite, knowing full well that I'm being looked at from the inside out. He can taste the salt on my tongue. He can feel the pieces sliding down my gullet. He can feel my nervous stomach rumbling as I force myself to chew, chew, chew. How can he want this? One of the men checks their watch. Send the chef home. Have our guest finish in 10 minutes or kill the girl. Make it a challenge. The man standing behind me huffs, grabs my head and smashes it into the table. The table cracks a little. Cheap plastic, probably stolen from a yard. He doesn't have a gun. He has some kind of pop rivet. He's not killing me. He's going to hurt me. Bad. It takes me a moment to register the pain. He pulls out my tongue and pierces it with a rivet. Start the clock. I can't feel my tongue. My eyes water. I try to eat without chewing, but the salts feel like sticking my mouth into a wall socket. I bite, chew, and swallow. Bite, chew, and swallow. I'm a machine. I'm doing this. Pain doesn't kill you, but by God, it's the worst I've ever felt. It's supposed to be good. It smells nice, but it sticks to my tongue lining like a sore cold. They're gonna kill her. I can see the gun. They're gonna kill her. I finished with a couple of minutes to spare. I almost choked on the white wine. I knocked over a couple of plates, and it looked like someone fed it all to a starving dog. I had barbecue glaze on my fingers. Hands are faster than forks. Looks good, one of them said. Hope you enjoyed your meal. Another one leaned in from behind, tapping me on my shoulder with an automatic weapon. What time are you having dinner tomorrow? He asked. It wasn't really a question. It would never be a question again. 6 p.m. I got $25. No cents. I still have my dinner at 6 p.m. to this day. I'd like to say Amy and I have found some kind of normalcy in all of this. But she turns pale every time I walk away to eat. We don't talk about it. We talk about everything but that. I've started getting deposits again. Not as big as I used to, but still significant. I've noticed I get a bit more if Amy is in the room, watching in silence. I've tried thinking about it in other ways, like I'm not a captive in my own body, but maybe an influencer to an audience of one, or a curator, a reviewer. Maybe there's some magical thing I can do that will grant me some kind of lenience. I don't know. But for now, I don't have any options. Every day, I step away from whatever I'm doing, and I have dinner. And I have it at exactly 6 p.m.
Today, I'm struggling to write this all down. It makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable that I'm the one that has to suggest that what I'm about to tell you might actually be happening. It's very hard not to panic. My mind is overloaded with information that I do not understand the meaning behind, only the consequences of. And those consequences, whether they are happening or not, are terrifying. I know I need to stay calm, as there are still many questions to be answered. Before I lose my mind over what this could all mean, I must remember that there is still a chance that something else is behind all this. Maybe it is simply miscalculations, misunderstandings, possibly even corruption. Whatever it could be, would be better than what it seems to be. I'll start at the beginning, so I can clear my head. I'll try and push past what I'm feeling right now, so I can explain it properly to you. Then, I need to get back out there and figure this whole thing out. It was another long night, roaming the streets of the city. However, this time it paid off, because in the early hours of the morning, I watched a lone hooded figure painting a new message on the side of yet another historical building. From the stance and height, I was sure they were male. I caught him halfway through the piece, so I watched from the other side of the road. It was fascinating actually, watching the mysterious artist at work. The ease in which he painted such beautiful but chillingly styled letters was extremely impressive. He wore a black hoodie and black trousers, not unlike how I myself was dressed in my attempt to blend into the shadows. After 20 minutes, he stepped back to admire his work. It read, "The unseen explosion could lead us to the end." I approached the artist quietly. "I watched you do that," I said, purposefully nonchalantly. He physically jumped, then spun around, his hood slipping off his head. I recognized him immediately, even though he was dressed much more casually than the previous time I had seen him. That mass of black hair, the wide eyes. It was the young man I had heard arguing with his father outside the biometric center. You, who are you? He spluttered, his eyes flashing from shocked to defiant, ready to argue. I held my hands up to signal I wasn't there to attack him, and he shut his mouth. I'm Haley Bennett. I'm a local writer. Your art has been rather beautiful, by the way. I quickly changed the subject so he wouldn't think too much about my occupation. Is all this about LaRue? I asked, keeping my tone relaxed but confident, wanting to give him the impression that I knew what he had been trying to convey. I didn't. The mention of the CEO of the private space company didn't relax him though. Are you working with LaRue? He whispered, his head whipping from side to side as he looked around to see if anybody was watching us. I looked too and saw a car parked down the street that hadn't been there 10 minutes before. Maybe he was right to be nervous. No, I'm not working with him. He's working against me, I think. Listen, shall we go get a drink? I think we could help each other out. It was a bluff, because I probably wasn't capable of anything that could help him. However, I knew that this young man could hold the answers to everything I'd been trying to uncover. He was still looking around, as though he was expecting somebody to jump out at any moment. I heard the rumble of an engine and knew that the car down the road was either going to approach us or simply drive past us any second. It was time to act. I know a quiet bar where we won't be overheard, and I think we should leave right away. He nodded, so I grabbed his arm and jogged into the grounds of the building he had just painted on. After cutting through, I took us down some side streets, just in case the car was indeed looking for us. Then I led him through the back entrance of the bar. I told him to sit in a corner booth that I knew from experience was well hidden from sight, and I went to the bar and ordered us both expensive double whiskeys. In my pocket, I clicked my dictaphone on to record and took out my notepad so I could reference it. Here's the beginning of the transcribed conversation. Here, drink this. It'll take the edge off a little. What's your name? Nolan. You seem nervous. I just want you to know that I have nothing to do with LaRue. Well, not through choice at least. I'm investigating some things that have been going around the city. I just want to know the truth. What makes you think I know the truth? How about we start with your messages? When the pound drops, it has begun. The children of the rich will be taken first. The unseen explosion will lead us to the end. They're poetic. Are you a lit student here? Or art? I'm about to start my maths masters. Surprising. Wouldn't it have been more fitting to have written them in equations then? I'm not sure you're taking this seriously. I have no intention of allowing you to waste my time. No, I'm sorry. I was just trying to lighten the mood a little. Listen, why don't I tell you a bit about myself first? You already know that my name is Haley Bennett. I'm a local freelance journalist. Don't wins. I've had my work blocked for the past week, and I know that something big is happening. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what it is. I think you can rest assured that anything you tell me isn't going anywhere, because I seem to have attracted the wrath of Christopher LaRue. I think he's the one stopping all of this from coming out. Why don't you tell me a bit about yourself? The whiskey seemed to be helping put Nolan at ease a little, because he explained to me that he was an aspiring artist who had been pushed into mathematics by his father, an incredibly wealthy and successful economic risk analyst. Nolan seemed sweet. He was a very gentle young man who was articulate but not condescending, like many of the rich kids in the city are. I could tell he wasn't ready to open up about his messages yet, so I went out on a limb and shared everything I had discovered so far. I told him about Professor Gardner potentially witnessing something unknown in the night sky, and I explained what he had revealed to me about his theory. I told Nolan about his unexpected death and about the ketamine I had detected from the professor's bottle of port. Sharing everything was a risk, I know that. However, I needed to let him know that I wasn't working with whoever he seemed to be rebelling against. He listened to my story intensely, nodding here and there. His eyes were sympathetic and thoughtful. He was quiet for a long time after, and I could tell that he was piecing his own puzzle together. So I let him think. Before long, he opened up. I could tell by the way it all spilled out of him that he had been desperate to share what he knew, and I hoped I could be an ally to him, as he clearly needed one. I'm not going to directly transcribe my recording from here, because it needs context. Rest assured that it is accurate though. Nolan took a deep breath and let it all out. I don't know the full ins and outs. What you've told me makes some sense to me. It's hard because Father doesn't tell me everything, so I have limited understanding myself. You are correct though. Something huge is going on. He, Father, works for Christopher LaRue. Closely. If you know the sort of man that LaRue is, then my father working so closely to him should tell you the sort of man that he is. The engineers at BOS have been designing a spaceship. I don't really know much about it, but it's all very secretive. But I do know it was originally designed to ensure mankind could survive climate change. From what I've picked up, mass amounts of these ships were to build over the next 50 years. The aim was to leave the planet for greener pastures, I suppose. Then, something happened recently that caused a huge number of the scientific community to congregate, and simultaneously, BOS have gone into overdrive. They've stopped all other developments and are purely focusing on this ship. Father probably knows the full details, but he hasn't told me. I don't think he trusts me entirely. I'm somewhat of a disappointment to him. I do know, though, that whatever is happening is going to result in a devastating shift in the economy. A major crash. And LaRue will profit from the whole thing. So, I said, glad to have some of the mystery becoming clearer. When the pound drops, it has begun. But what will have begun, Nolan? He shrugged, clearly frustrated. I don't have all the answers. They're out there, but I don't have total access to the information. I just know there are going to be some huge shifts in the economy before whatever it is that they have planned is put into action. If they crash the economy, then it will be as devastating for people as whatever it is that's making them think we need to leave the planet. Food shortages, power outages, water stoppages. I don't need to explain to you what that would lead to. Because I was recording, I decided to keep pushing rather than pause to think about everything it was telling me. Your next message. The children of the rich will be taken first. Well, again, I don't know the full details. I'll explain the best I can. I have a lot of rich friends. Well, friends probably isn't the right term. I went to the best public school in the United Kingdom, so I grew up with the most privileged people in the entire country. I didn't really get on with most of them, but I am extremely close to one of the boys I went to school with. He means a lot to me. But he's leaving soon. Nolan paused for a long time. Then, I could see that he was extremely emotional about the subject, so I went to the bar and gave him the chance to take a moment for himself. I ordered more whiskey, not to get the kid drunk, but because this was a conversation that required strong alcohol. When I took it back to him, his eyes were red, but he was composed. My friend is leaving, indefinitely, he told me. I didn't quite get what he meant. Can you explain more? Do you mean that your friend is moving to another country? He shook his head. I don't know. It's all such a big mess. He doesn't even know where he's going. All we understand is that he and his sister will be kept from contacting anyone until BOS launch whatever it is they have up their sleeve. We don't know when that is, but we do know that he won't have contact with anyone until then. Not even his parents. Ben and his sisters aren't the only ones either. Others will be joining them. We don't know who or how many, but whatever the reason behind it, it is so secretive that his parents hadn't given him any information. Ben and I think that they must have signed agreements that will be void if they speak out. But to genuinely stop them from speaking out to their own children means that the consequences of doing so must be dire, surely. Nolan took a deep breath before continuing. I do have a theory, of course. I believe that BOS are selling tickets onto the ships they are building, that the children of the wealthy will be kept on the ground until the time comes. The urgency of the situation, the speed of which things have progressed, it suggests to me that these tickets are scarce, because although the tech is there to build the ships, the time and money isn't. I think something is coming soon. I remember the chalkboard in the theater with the absurd total on it. I saw something that suggested 320 billion pounds. I told him. He frowned. That's an impossible amount of money. That would absolutely crash the economy. If this is right, then they couldn't crash the economy and then build the ship. It wouldn't work. I was out of my depth, but I threw a theory of my own out. Perhaps they could have taken down payments, deposits, take those paid for into hiding until the final sum is required. Maybe that's why Ben's parents are keeping quiet. What if they lost their places if they told anyone? Nolan was quiet for a minute. I'm not sure. I just can't see how it would all work without crashing the economy immediately. I do know that I'm very suspicious about the whole thing though. Ben leaves tomorrow, and as it stands, we have no idea when we might see each other again. He is being collected from Oxford. One thing that surprises me is that I'm not joining him. Father might dislike me, but if there's a way out, he wouldn't leave me behind. I suppose that leads me to your final message, I said. The unseen explosion will lead us to the end. What does it mean? Nolan considered his answer. Up until this evening, I didn't think this could really be possible. I know, I've tried to speak out, but I don't think I really believed what I wrote tonight. Some of the information you've given me though, it confirms something I read this week. Haley, what do you know about gamma ray bursts? Nothing, I answered immediately. I don't have a clue what they are. Nolan pulled his phone out. Look at this. He showed me a picture on his phone of the following email. H. Gardner is a problem. If he speaks out in the state he's in, the project credibility will be at risk. I want an estimation of the financial damage it could cause. If it's above what we previously discussed, then get in touch with Madden and tell her to find a way to deal with it before I do. L. I asked him if I could take a picture of it, which he agreed to. Is L LaRue? And who is H? I asked. Yes, it's LaRue, and H is my father. My surname is Holden. My father is Dennis Holden. L and H, how very encryptive of them. He actually left his laptop open in his hotel room, here in the city. Can you believe that? I was looking for information on where Ben was going, but this was the only email that made any sense to me. I looked up Gardner after I read it. I know that he is an expert on gamma ray bursts. It was, I suppose, his specialist field. His theory was to do with patterns in detectable gamma ray bursts being a prediction of future ones. I've read some of his papers, and they are phenomenal. The statistics are so low though. When I looked them up, I wasn't entirely certain that the person I read about was the person the ruined father was referring to. But after what you've told me tonight, I think we can both agree that it's the same Gardner. Admittedly, I don't know anything about this discovery you're saying he made. The one you reported on. I do know though, that in March there was a congregation of senior mathematicians and scientists at the Redacted Observatory in Country Redacted. It was kept very quiet, but whispers did get out because one of the lecturers here attended it and it went on for an entire month, so his students had a substitute professor. There were no students or juniors invited, from what we could tell, which is very odd. Such an important conference, but they don't invite those they are training? Extremely strange indeed. From what I can gather, it was only top-level mathematicians and very high-up scientists. If Professor Gardner made a discovery here in the city, then why would he go to... Country redacted. I asked,
What does that have to do with anything? The telescope here is old. It's excellent, but in modern day standards, it isn't the best by far. Maybe Gardner might have been able to detect something special by using it. One of the patterns he had theorized about for so long, for example. I suppose to him, his studies were like the back of his hand. But if whatever he saw was significant enough, then all of those brought in to research it further would have needed a much more powerful telescope.
redacted.
Observatory is one of the best in the world.
The information overload was giving me a headache.
Can you spell this out for me, Nolan? Can you tell me exactly what you think is happening?
He shook his head, holding his hand up.
There is no exactly situation here. I can only theorize with the information you've given me. However, it seems that if what you told me is true, combined with what I already know, then I am able to present a theory. I believe that Gardner may have seen a pattern that night in March that enabled him to predict, accurately in his opinion, that a gamma ray burst will reach Earth. We're all going to burn, he told me.
I muttered. Nolan smiled slightly.
Well, that was a little bit dramatic of him, perhaps. It's true that, in the event of a powerful gamma ray burst reaching Earth, then the ozone layer would likely be destroyed, meaning the sun's ultraviolet rays would be hitting us directly. No protection from them would cause all sorts of problems. But ultimately, the main damage caused will be the death of plankton in the ocean.
I frowned.
Plankton? As in algae at the bottom of the sea? Why on earth would that be the main problem? Wouldn't we fry slowly? Or get skin cancer or something? Photosynthetic plankton are the beginning of the food chain. They are responsible for oxygen. Skin cancer would take time to kill, but if photosynthetic plankton was destroyed, which it would be, then it would cause total extinction within months.
I paused for a moment, trying to regain myself.
I'm sorry, Nolan, but I still don't understand. If this is true, then why would it be kept so quiet? Why wouldn't the experts speak out? Wouldn't the entire world be better off working together to try and find a solution, rather than a very elite few?
Nolan looked confused.
I don't know. That aspect of this entire nonsense is the hardest to believe. But if my father is involved, then something corrupt is going on with money. Maybe the people who are working on this are being paid to stay silent.
I shook my head disbelievingly.
So, the world's best mathematicians and scientists are being paid off to keep the end of the world secret? That doesn't seem at all likely. There would have to be more behind it. I agree, Haley. There's more going on here. There has to be. We can't truly be about to go extinct, can we? The science may appear to point towards it, but the mathematician in me knows the chances of it actually happening are so unlikely. Without more information, it's hard for me to truly worry about anything other than finding out where they are taking Ben. And the others, of course. What if they've made a mistake, and they're about to put them all into hiding for ages, for no reason? How can I stop it? I don't know what to do. Do you think you can help me figure this out?
I found it strange that he thought I would be capable of helping him at all. Now that I had shared everything with him, I didn't know any more than he did. Perhaps, though, he simply didn't want to hold the burden of this investigation on his own. I could relate to that.
I don't know what help I can possibly be.
I told him honestly.
I don't understand a quarter of what you're saying to me. Yet, you had already discovered so much.
He interrupted.
It was all your answers that enabled me to put all of mine together. You might not know the language, but you have a translator. Please, can you help me stop them from taking Ben away from me?
Nolan's love for his friend was clear, and usually I would have forced someone in his position to step away from something they were so emotionally wrapped up in. He was right though. He was a translator for me. He had already been able to explain more than I would have ever thought I would be capable of understanding. I was scared investigating this alone too. Together, maybe we could break this whole thing. So, I agreed to help him. I surprised myself when I managed to form a plan, despite the overwhelming amount of information I had to process. I'll explain to you what we are going to do. Ben is due to be collected from his college in Oxford tomorrow. We don't know very much about it, but we do know that he is going from his college to a top secret destination, where he will remain for the foreseeable future. We can't go all undercover police officer and drive behind, because it is near on impossible to genuinely follow someone in that way undetected. We would either be spotted or we'd lose him. Instead, we're going to try something that may well not work. The only way I could think to give us the best chance of finding where Ben is being taken to is to plant a tracker on whatever vehicle collects him. Together, Nolan and I are going to Oxford tomorrow morning. I've instructed him to make a scene, and then I'm going to slip a simple vehicle tracker on Ben's transport. I will link it up to my GPS. We'll wait a while, then we'll go after them. In theory, it sounds simple. In practice, there are a lot of things that could go wrong. If, for example, Ben is being taken out of the country, then we'll lose him when they reach an airport. If I get caught trying to plant the device, then who knows what will happen. But I can't sit back and do nothing, partly because of Nolan's desperation to try and reach his friend. I want to help him, but also because I am rather desperate myself. I want so much for this entire thing to be a mistake. I just can't fathom the enormity of it all. I want to complete the puzzle, and I want to find out that it's all some financial scam or a huge misunderstanding or something. Anything but a gamma ray burst that'll hit Earth. Because if it is a gamma ray burst, then Professor Gardner was right. The end of the world is imminent. We're all going to burn. I'll update when I know more. I didn't sleep well last night. How could I, after my conversation with Nolan? I was up late, glued to my laptop, as I researched everything I could about gamma ray bursts. When I was finally able to drift off, I had a horrendous nightmare about death rays and the end of the planet. When I woke, my mind was still reeling from everything. I sent an email to Dr. Madden. I asked to meet and designed the email as one that would draw attention. Subject: bright lights and spaceships. I was reluctant to discuss anything with her after everything that happened last time we spoken. However, I need more answers. The time came to meet Nolan for a road trip to Oxford, and my brain was in full overload. I couldn't make sense of the multiple public theories I had read about, let alone the extra information that only I, you, and an elite few are aware of. Nolan and I met at a cafe, ordering coffees before we planned to set off. As soon as the waiter left our table, an awkward silence descended upon us. I decided to fill it by addressing what was, in my opinion, the elephant in the room. So, Nolan, what actually is a gamma ray burst? He laughed, not unkindly. I suppose I didn't spell it out particularly well last night, did I? Shall I give it another go? Do we have time? I checked my watch and nodded. He took a sip of his coffee. A gamma ray burst is an incredibly intense explosion of radiation. It's largely believed to occur when two collapsing stars collide. It presents as a very large and dangerous beam that can cause a lot of destruction to anything sensitive in its path. Earth, for example, is particularly sensitive. Well, life on Earth is particularly sensitive, I should say. I decided to test what I thought I had learned last night. Am I correct in thinking that, in order for a gamma ray burst to actually hit Earth, the situation would have to be very exact, incredibly specific positioning of a star system that is in the last phases of its life, like WR10 something? Nolan raised his eyebrows at me, impressed with my name drop. WR104, you mean? Nice. So in the instance of a WR104, we have two stars that are locked in a binary orbit. One of those stars is a Wolf-Rayet star. End of its life, about to go supernova. And the collision of the two stars will create a black hole? I offered. Spot on, Haley. What you have just described will definitely happen. The question is, when will it happen? I checked my watch and saw that it was time to make a move. Let's pick this up later. If we want to beat rush hour, we need to get going. I signaled for the bill and got ready for the next phase of the investigation. The road trip to Oxford. A couple of hours later, we arrived at a luxury apartment complex where Ben lived. I parked in a public car park down the road. We could see the front of the complex and the road in front of it, as it was on the main route to the colleges of Oxford University, where Ben apparently studied politics and international relations. There was a fair bit of traffic and plenty of tourists on the pavements. I couldn't believe that a student needed to live in such luxury. There was certainly no box room in student halls for Ben. Nolan told me that Ben's father had bought the flat when Ben was 14, in preparation for him studying at Oxford. In a few years, it would be used by his younger sister, Lottie. When I suggested that she might not want to go to Oxford, Nolan laughed and told me it didn't work that way. We had 2 hours to kill before Ben was due to be collected by persons unknown, to be taken to destination unknown. We decided to just wait in the car, in case something unexpected happened. I can't say I was hopeful that our plan to plan a tracker would work, because there were just too many variables that could alter the course of events. Plus, it seemed a bit too James Bond. As the clock ticked closer to Ben's mystery departure time, I could tell that Nolan was itching to see him. I got so irritated by his constant shuffling and heavy breathing, I suggested he went up and said a quick goodbye. Nolan shook his head sadly. He explained that Ben's parents were in town, wanting to spend some quality time with him and Lottie before they left. Ben's father had some huge problems with Nolan, so he and Ben hadn't been able to see each other. I didn't press for details, popping on the radio and waiting for time to pass. Shortly before we needed to be ready for action, I asked Nolan what his plan was for the big distraction. I could tell by the constant tapping of his foot that he was getting more and more nervous. "I'm not entirely sure yet," he told me. "I'm hoping it comes to me at the time." I felt slight irritation at his lack of preparation, but I let it be. Right on time, an expensive minibus with blacked out windows pulled up outside the apartments. I saw a traffic warden waddle over as soon as they saw it park. Whoever was in the driver's seat must have shown some sort of pasto, because the traffic warden waddled back the way he came from, leaving the minibus as it was. The privacy glass meant that I couldn't tell if there was anyone inside the bus other than a driver, which posed a problem. There could be a van load of people looking out at me while I was trying to attach a tracker. "You're going to need to do well with this distraction," I told Nolan. "When Ben comes outside, go straight out and do your thing. Do not look back at me. Do not even think about me. Get it in your head that I do not exist. Do whatever you can for 10 minutes or so. Then go and find something to do around Oxford. We'll meet back at the car in 3 hours." Nolan didn't question me. I think he was too nervous to speak. I noticed that he looked in the vanity mirror to check his hair while we waited for Ben to appear. It felt like forever, but in reality, it was only 15 minutes later that we watched a blonde-haired young man around the same age as Nolan walking out of the building. I didn't need to ask if this was Ben, because Nolan gasped and tensed up beside me. A young girl stomped out behind him. "That's Lottie," Nolan muttered, his voice shaking slightly. "His little sister." Ben and Lottie stood in the small courtyard of the building until 2 of the security men who had been at the theater emerged from the building, pulling along suitcases. A gray steel one that assumed to be Ben's, and a pink one covered in stickers of horses and boy band members. I was surprised to see that the security men must have already been inside with them. Had they been under protection all this time? An older man and woman, presumably the parents, came next. The woman looked solemn, and I felt sorry for her. The man looked entitled and uncaring. I already disliked him. "Okay, Nolan, I think it's time to do this. Good luck." Nolan didn't respond, instead just slipping out of the car quietly. Then he was running up to them. and I watched Ben's face light up with absolute joy and confusion as he spotted him, whilst his dad's face turned red as gammon. I fought the urge to laugh, wishing I could enjoy the commotion Nolan was about to cause, but I forced my attention away from them. I had my own job to do. I tied back my hair, slipped a baseball cap on my head, and then put on a large pair of sunglasses. I didn't know who was watching, so I didn't want to risk being recognized anywhere near Nolan. Glancing in the mirror, I confirmed that I was disguised well enough. I took a deep breath and put my phone in my hand. It was time to go. I waltzed towards the minibus, trying to blend in with the busy tourists that walked along the pavement. I forced myself to ignore whatever was going on ahead, which I found rather hard. I could hear Nolan emotionally shouting, "Why do you think you have the right to dictate our lives?" The commotion it was causing had made passersby stop and stare, and that was perfect, because I knew that it meant anyone watching out of the van would be focused on the courtyard rather than me. By the time I was slightly behind the back end of the minibus, I was too hyped up to listen to the scene. Blood rushed through my ears as I looked out for traffic before freeing across the road. As I stepped off the curb, I allowed my phone to slide out of my hands onto the concrete beneath me. It fell with a bounce, slipping underneath the minibus, which was exactly what I wanted. I bent down as though to pick it up, crouching behind the van. I slipped the tracker out of my jacket pocket and tried to clip it onto the bumper of the vehicle as quickly as I could. My hands were sweaty and a little shaky, so I kept sliding onto the ground with a small thud. Panic overtook as I tried a third time to attach it. I was sure that I would have to give up and tell Nolan that I just couldn't do it. However, to my relief, I suddenly felt the click under my hand that told me the tracker was finally attached. I almost punched the air with triumph. But then I heard a van door slide open and a shadow fell beside me. My heart leapt into my throat. I expected to feel the rough grab of one of the security men, and I tensed my shoulders, ready for it. I heard footsteps walking away from me, towards shouting in the courtyard. With Nolan clearly doing a fantastic job at distraction, I swiftly grabbed my phone, stood up, and walked away. I made myself at home in an old second-hand bookstore, curling up in an armchair in the corner with a book for cover. I urgently loaded up the app that would tell me if the tracker was working. To my absolute joy and surprise, I saw a moving green dot. It had worked. By the time Nolan and I met at the car, the app showed that the van had stopped several times but was heading up the motorway. And so, we set out on yet another road trip. One that would take us several hours. We were heading north. Nolan was quiet. It was clear to me that he was upset after the argument with Ben's dad. Small talk wasn't distracting him, so I took the opportunity to dig a little further into everything I was trying to understand. This binary pinwheel, I started, hoping I could suck him into a conversation about science. When the stars do eventually collide, do we know for certain that they will release a gamma ray burst that will hit Earth? There's no certainty, no definite answer. I said this last night. For a start, the collision might not even result in a gamma ray burst, from what I understand. What's all the worry about then? Everything I had read about the end of W104 pointed towards a simultaneous end to Earth, so this knowledge surprised me. Nolan considered his answer for a moment. If a gamma ray burst occurred from W104, then it is predicted to be up to 20 degrees in diameter. And if the star was facing Earth pole on, then we would be in direct line of this ray. However, if the polar inclination was 30 degrees, Earth would not be hit. Does that make sense? I think so. I wish Nolan hadn't started talking numbers, but I was glad he was finally talking. Is the star facing Earth directly then? The original discovery of WR104 suggested that the polar inclination to Earth was 10 to 15 degrees. In that case, with a ray of 20 degrees, then Earth would indeed be hit. Technology improves every day though, and later pictures by telescopes have suggested that the polar inclination is actually 30 to 40 degrees. So we wouldn't be hit? I asked. Nolan frowned. Seemingly not. There are many scientists who refuse to let go of the initial measurements though. Debate has been ongoing about whether a burst will be released, and if it is, whether it will hit us or not. I suppose, I pondered, that an important question to ask is, when are the stars of W104 supposed to collide? Nolan paused for a minute. Well, it could be tomorrow. Don't gasp like that. It could also be in 500,000 years. But it could be tomorrow? Or it could be in 500,000 years, Haley. We lay off the heavy subjects for a while, chatting about this and that, until Nolan noticed that the dot on the app that we were following had come to a stop. He looked up the area on my phone and saw that it was an ex-military base in Scotland that had been closed for a decade. For the next few hours, we chatted about what might be there. As we entered Scotland, the weather took a turn for the worst. Thick grey clouds forced me to put on the headlights, and heavy raindrops splattered on the windscreen. After a very long drive, we finally made it to our destination. And that is where we sit now, waiting. For what? We aren't sure. It's clear that it's a military base. It's a very large field, surprisingly flat for the highlands, surrounded by 10-foot-high metal fences that are topped with thick barbed wire. The fences are shiny metal, not rusted like you might expect from a decade-old barricade. No, I suspect they were fitted recently. There aren't watchposts or soldiers or anything that suggests any sort of presence. It is clear that nobody expected someone might stumble across this place and want to know what's going on. Inside the field, the minibus is parked next to what looks like 3 long concrete barracks. They have no windows, so no light is emitted from inside. As it becomes dark, the buildings are fading from our vision. Parked outside are 3 minibus, all identical. One of them is the one that brought Ben and Lottie here. Does whoever is behind all this seriously intend on holding the children of the rich here for the foreseeable future? People who are used to being waited on to have anything they want, let alone everything they need. It seems unlikely. There's absolutely nothing here. Just 3 ominous buildings. The nearest town is 40 miles away. But I feel that's irrelevant because nobody is getting out of this lockdown area anyway. There's a mechanical gate, we think, but we haven't seen it open. Surely, you can't just lock people in a concrete prison and leave them to go mad. It doesn't make sense. We decided to wait here, because there has to be something to witness. Thankfully, I packed my rucksack full of snacks, and there are blankets in my boot. It's already cold, and I can't leave the heating on, or else my battery might die. Something tells me we don't want to get stuck out here. Nolan is dozing off in the passenger seat. Or maybe he's just pretending to. I don't mind. It gives me a chance to write this up and think about everything. The wind is picking up out there, and it's dark now. My legs are cramping from sitting in the same position for so long. So I'll think I will take a walk. It'll help clear my head a little. 10:30 p.m. There were screams traveling in the wind from the direction of the concrete buildings. Real screams. Human screams. They were full of absolute terror, and there were so many of them. Even over the wind roaring, I could still hear people shrieking. At first, I thought it must be my imagination warping the sound of the Scotland gales. So I woke Nolan and dragged him out of the car. I watched his face pale, and I knew he could hear them too. We stood there together, listening to the wails of devastation and pain. Then, everything but the wind stopped. Nolan is losing it. I think he's going to do something stupid. For now, I've managed to drag him back into the car while we try and decide what to do next. What is going on inside those concrete buildings? I'm not sure I want to know anymore. The screams we had heard outside were still ringing in my ears. I knew they'd haunt me for a long time. It wasn't clear what had caused them, but the only place they could have come from was the military base. There was nothing else around here. I couldn't keep Nolan inside the car for long. He was becoming hysterical, and being trapped in such a small area was making him panic. When I suggested to have a look around, he jumped out and ran towards the fence. "Nolan!" I shouted over the wind, running to catch up with him. "Let's stick together, we don't know what's going on." He bashed his fist against the fence in frustration and shouted Ben's name, the wind carrying it behind us instead of towards the concrete buildings. We walked next to the fence for half a mile, but there were no gaps, no small gates, no way in. He finally let me guide him back to the car. We were soaked through from the rain, and both sat there shivering. I waited until Nolan's breath had slowed, then tried to get through to him gently. "What I think we need to do is wait until someone leaves. It'll give us some information." "What were those screams, Haley?" His voice was full of desperation. "Was it Ben? And Lottie? Why were they in so much pain?" I wished I had answers for him. I don't know. Honestly, they were so loud. I just can't understand what was going on. Nolan started to cry quietly beside me. I too was incredibly overwhelmed by what a horrible night it had been. Little did I know, things were about to get a lot worse. It came through the vents of the car, a smell that I knew instantly, a smell that took me back to my childhood. Suddenly, I was walking outside the crematorium after my granddad's funeral. My mother's high heels clicking on the path next to me, my dad holding my hand tightly. I didn't notice the scent straight away. It was such an ingrained smell of the background that it wasn't until it hit the back of my throat that I knew something was off. It was sweet and sickly, though not entirely unpleasant. There was something grossly wrong about it too. I'd sniffed loudly, rudely I suppose. Then I asked my mom what the horrible smell was. She had shot me a look that told me to shut up, and my dad had squeezed my hand sharply. Back then, it had taken me a moment to realize that the source of the smell was the burning corpses from within the crematorium. Maybe not my granddad's, not yet, but others. This time, sat outside those barracks in Scotland, I knew that horrible smell as soon as it infiltrated the air of the car. I held my breath and twisted out of my seat as quickly as I could, hoping for the fresh air of the Highlands. I had to get away from it because I couldn't cope with confronting what it meant. I ran a little up the path until finally I had to breathe in. To my horror, the smell was even stronger outside the car. My mouth watered excessively as my whole body was repulsed. "Ailey, what's wrong?" Nolan had followed me. I looked at him for a moment, watching his expression turn to one of puzzlement as it hit him. Was that smell? I did cry then. And like my mother's sharp look, like my father's squeeze of my hand, my tears triggered Nolan's realization. Eyes wide, he looked towards the concrete buildings, but it was so dark out there that he was just looking into darkness. "What have they done to them?" He wailed, his hands yanking at his hair. "What have they done to my Ben?" I couldn't answer him, so instead, I gripped him tightly to me and let him sob into my arms. "Nolan," I croaked. He didn't answer me. Perhaps because he couldn't. But this was important. "Nolan, please, look." There were lights coming from the direction of the building, not from inside the building. We already knew there were no windows. No. These were headlights, 3 sets of them. I'll make them take me to Ben. Nolan gasped. He pulled away from me, about to run towards the gate. I put my hands firmly on his face and forced him to look at me. What do you think they will do? I hissed. You're not stupid, so don't act like it. If we assume the worst here. His face crumpled, but I ignored it, gripping him tighter. If they are dead, then they are gone. You running up to it will only get you killed too. I don't want to be here. If Ben isn't. His voice crumpled. And what if he is here? What if he's locked in there and that smell is something else? You running up will only mean that they'll cut us off from investigating this further. Right now, we have a chance to get to the bottom of this. Whatever the outcome, we have to find out. For Ben, for Lottie. Get in the car, Nolan. Please. I almost collapsed with relief when he nodded. We watched from my car as the lights grew brighter. We didn't hear the rumble of engines, not over the wind, but we did hear the creak of the mechanical gate as it opened. The 3 minivans sped out and turned away from us, back the way we had all arrived. They hadn't seen us in the dark. Within the blink of an eye, they were gone. The gate immediately closed behind them. We sat in silence for a moment. Is this your plan? Nolan spat at me. Let them drive away? Why are we not chasing them, for God's sake? I ignored the viciousness of Nolan's tone. I felt like I'd been crushed by a ton of bricks, so I couldn't even begin to imagine how he was feeling. I knew I needed to come up with a plan of action quickly, to keep him focused and sane. We can't chase them for the same reason we didn't on the way here. It's too obvious. We've only learned as much as we have because no one suspects we have the ability to track all this. But we do have the ability, together. Let's not lose it by acting rash. I might have an idea. Have you got any idea on you? Nolan scowled, but nodded. How about money? I asked. And can you drive? What are you on about? I have a credit card, not cash. And yes, I can drive. I don't understand what you... I think our best chances here are to split up. We'll drive to the nearest town or city if needs be. You can rent a car. I'll sign into the tracker app on your phone, and then you can follow them. By the time we've got everything sorted, they'll be a fair bit ahead. Just go where they go, stop where they stop. Note everything down that you see. There has to be a pattern, and that pattern could tell us a lot. I'll head back to the city. I still got some lists to follow at home. We'll meet back up as soon as we can, and see what we've got. Nolan didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. I jumped on his silence, starting the engine and pulling away. I was aware that the sun was due to rise, and I did not want him getting so much as a glimpse on those concrete buildings. It was best left in the dark for now. As we passed the mechanical gate, he started to protest, but I interrupted him. Whatever happened in there, we can't get in. We can go after whatever is coming next though. It's time to leave. A few hours later, I said goodbye to Nolan as he drove away in a hire car and set off on my way home. I knew that we should have probably booked a couple of beds somewhere in Scotland and got some sleep. But I also knew that neither of us would be able to sleep. Why not just push on? After a very long drive, I finally arrived back home. I was completely exhausted by that point and crashed out on my sofa. When I woke up, I checked my email. Dr. Madden had replied, not long after I had emailed her actually. But I was not all surprised, given my subject line of bright stars and spaceships. She wanted to meet as a matter of urgency, and followed it up with several more emails asking when was suitable. I thought about Dr. Madden's place in all of this madness. She was right there at the beginning of Professor Gardner's discovery, and she had evaded me for 3 weeks, following whatever actually went on during the Astronomy Institute's open evening in March. She had only opened up to me when I had cornered her at the theater, where the conference of mathematicians and scientists had taken place. And still then, she had tried to manipulate me. Nolan's dad, Dennis Houghton, and the CEO of BOS, Christopher LaRue, knew who she was, and had even exchanged an email that had mentioned her. Get in touch with Madden and tell her to find a way to deal with it before I do. She seemed to be everywhere. What part did she have to play in all of this? Was she responsible for Gardner's death? Was she responsible for the death of Ben, his younger sister, their peers? Were they even dead? My mind kept pulling me back to the vision of Lottie's pink suitcase, watching it being dragged along by the security man outside the Oxford flat. I'd never forget those childish stickers of Pony and musicians, just like I'd never forget the screams that traveled in the wind in Scotland. As those screams echoed around my soul, I felt a sudden and intense anger overcame me, the entirety of it directed at Dr. Madden. I fired back an email to her, telling her to meet me that evening. I was done playing games. Just after I had emailed Madden, I received a text from the porter who worked at Professor Gardner's college residence. Thomas. I tried to cool off a bit as I responded to his own wish to meet. He wanted to know if it was too late to get a late lunch. There was something he wanted to tell me. I hadn't any intention of asking Thomas for permission to record our conversation. Neither did I intend on doing it secretly. So I was surprised when he asked if I could, going as far as to suggest recording it on his own phone and sending it to me if I didn't have anything with me to use. He said he had something to confess. I placed the dictaphone on the table and asked him what it was he wanted to say. He jumped right in the deep end.
I think I may be responsible for the professor's death. Why do you think that, Thomas? I'll tell you. But first off, I need you to know that I would have never done anything I thought might cause Bern harm. He was a dear, dear friend of mine. I know that seems unlikely, the porter and the professor. But we had become friends when he tutored my daughter through the GCSEs many years ago. She's graduated from Durham University now. He was a brilliant man, and my wife and I were devastated when we realized his health was declining. When did you realize that? A long time ago. Gosh, it must have been at least 3 years now. It's a slow path, but devastating all the same. It started with him getting names confused, but we all do that, don't we? Then it was misplacing items, misunderstanding dates. It went from occasional mistakes to every day, very quickly. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a couple years ago, but over the last year, it's got particularly bad. He started getting his work mixed up, and that was when I knew he was very ill. That's one of my points. He was so ill, his specialist told me personally last month that it could come at any time. He didn't have any family, you see, so it all came through me. I knew it would be better for him to go into hospice, but this had been his home for so long. I couldn't bear to do it to him. Then he had that bad night at the telescope. What do you know about that night? He came home in such a state, talking about poles, stars, bursts. I didn't understand any of it. Dr. Madden came to see me the next day. Do you know Dr. Madden personally then? Oh yes, quite well actually. She studied here. I was a reporter too, if you can believe that. Well, I suppose you can. I'm no spring chicken. She studied on the Burnt. She and I didn't have a connection like Bern and I. She didn't mix with the help, let's just say. But we knew each other well. What did she say when she came to see you? She was quiet, elusive, one might say. She wouldn't go into details, but she told me that the professor had discovered something of great importance. She was taking it up with those much more senior than her, even more than him, and she tried to get a statement from him, and then he had jumbled everything up. She needed him to keep calm. She said it was a matter of life and death on a great scale that we ensured he could communicate correctly. So, what did you both do? I'm ashamed now. I truly am. But we drugged him. It isn't how it sounds, I promise. It was a small amount of sedative. Dr. Madden had it measured out by a friend of hers. I just had to slip it into his port. I felt awful that first time, but she assured me it was fine. And it was. In fact, it worked. He was much more with it. Of course, as the weeks went by, he deteriorated. Not so long ago, Dr. Madden upped his dose. I questioned it, of course. She said, if I don't do this, then someone else will do something worse. I asked what she meant, but she wouldn't tell me. She just promised me that she was doing it for his own safety.
I thought about this carefully while Thomas took a moment to have a drink. The email that Nolan had seen on his dad's computer suggested that this could be true. I needed to be careful that my anger at Dr. Madden didn't force me to put blame on her before I knew all the facts.
And you trusted her? Yes, of course. She cared about Bernd very much. He was something of a father figure to her, I suppose. You trusted her enough to put a drug in his drink. Well, when the dosage was upped, I said I didn't feel comfortable doing it anymore. The port started being delivered. I didn't tell anybody what I knew. I just forgot about it, really. I suppose I wanted to forget. I'm so very sorry for it now. It's only when I read something yesterday in the news. A young girl died of it. Some man put it in her drink when she was in a bar. She was only 23, the same age as my Penny. When I saw the drug he used... hold on, I've written it down. Yes. Cat Min. The news reporter said it was a horse tranquilizer. I was horrified. I feel like it's all my fault. Would he have lived on for years if it wasn't for me keeping quiet about all of it? You seem to be forgetting that it was Dr. Madden who asked you to do it. Dr. Madden did what she thought was right. She has been working on things that could change everything for all of us. If you believe that, then you must believe that what she did was right too. I'm not sure. I just know I felt horrendously guilty. I had to tell someone. Before. Before what, Thomas? I don't know what is going on here. I wouldn't even talk to you, but I needed to say something. All this silence can be a good thing. Dr. Madden. She doesn't like it when I do that. Dr. Madden and her colleagues have come together for something that will shape all of our futures. Do you know this from Dr. Madden herself? Not just her. The other porters too. We hear all sorts from our positions. So, what exactly is it that you've heard? It's just gossip, really. But there have been an unheard number of early retirements this summer. Not just from professors and lecturers, but from porters too. Everyone knows something is happening. No one knows what. But it's enough to send people home. Away from the bubble here. Away from the magic of this place. They're running home to be with their families. And what is it you want me to do with this information, Thomas? I don't know. Whatever you think is best. It isn't for me to decide. It isn't for me to hide either. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm going to Australia with my wife and Penny. We're going to have a long, overdue holiday with my sister and her partner. I just couldn't cope with leaving without getting this off my chest. Please, think negatively of me if you will, for acting so blindly. But Dr. Madden, she was just doing what she could to help Bern, and all the rest of us. I'm sure of it. It's not really for me to judge, Thomas.
Well, what a revelation. So, it was indeed Dr. Madden who was drugging Professor Gardner. Did that lead to his death? It's questionable. Just before I met up with Thomas, had he simply emailed me that information, I would have been sure that Dr. Madden had cruel intention behind anything she was up to. Thomas spoke with honesty and integrity though, and I trusted his opinion of Dr. Madden. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean I believe that she's innocent as Thomas seems to think. But I do believe that he thinks everything he said about her is true. And that means something. I've just had a text from Nolan. Bizarrely, he's at the shipport in Dover. He must have been driving for the entire day. I'm surprised he didn't fall asleep at the wheel. There is no sign of the minibus. he says. Just loads of ferry on their way away from England. He's booked a hotel for the night, so he's going to get some sleep. Then head back to the city. I really got to wrap this up for now though, as I must sleep before I meet Dr. Madden. I'll update you as soon as I can. What with my interview with Madden and Nolan's tracking information tomorrow, perhaps we'll know more. I am truly sorry for taking such a long time to update this. But I've had a lot of decisions to make, and all of my energy has been drained on trying to decide what the right thing to do is. I have a lot that I need to write down, but it's going to take me a while to explain everything. I'm not sure I'm making the right decision by sharing this here, but I'm going to go ahead and do so anyway. When I last updated you, Nolan was in Dover, having followed the minibus there after they left the military camp in Scotland. We believed we had been close enough to hear and smell the murder of his friend Ben and the other children of the rich. Everything was extremely confusing, and the investigation appeared to point towards the gamma ray burst hitting Earth in the near future, despite the fact all public research pointed towards that being very unlikely. I made my way to the biomedics laboratory where Dr. Madden had requested me meet. I had already been there once before, when I had skulked around after two scientists committed suicide by jumping from the roof of the building. I had also first seen Nolan here, arguing with his dad about his father's part in his madness. I'd never actually been inside the building though. The same security man that had guarded the doors of the theater during Madden's conference guarded the doors of the biomedics laboratory too. This time, instead of blocking me, one took me inside. I followed him in silence down long steel grey corridors as our footsteps echoed around us. There was no artwork on the walls, no carpet to soften the place up. It was all very cold and clinical. I was shown into a small room that reminded me of a police interview area. A large grey table and 4 steel chairs were the only furniture in the room. In fact, it was totally empty other than that and a small intercom attached to the wall. "I'm going to have to search you," the security man informed me. I thought about protesting, but something about the tone of the security man's voice made me realize that if I did, then I would be probably ejected from the area. I wanted this interview, so I nodded curtly. He took my dictaphone from my inner pocket and then left me with my hand back. I didn't bother commenting, instead taking a seat and waiting for Madden. I didn't have to wait long. She breezed in after a few minutes, closing the door behind her and sitting opposite me gracefully before offering me a weak smile. I didn't return it. Instead, I jumped right in. "I knew you were involved in Gardner's death. Even if you did not intend for him to die, I have proof that you took illegal, immoral risks to silence him. Evidence that will stand up in court. So I suggest you give me a very good reason to keep it to myself, Dr. Madden." Madden froze. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before looking at me. Her eyes were watery and her lips pursed. She swallowed noisily. Bernd was a wonderful man. He was very important to me. I don't have any family, and I've never really had time for friends. He meant so much, and I am utterly distraught that he's gone. "He isn't simply gone though, is he?" I snapped. "I'm not interested in attending a pity party, doctor. I want more." I watched the look of defeat wash over Madden's face, and I realized that I was in control here. I had her. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to tell you what's going on." She tensed suddenly as the door opened. Madden and I turned towards it, and I was surprised to see her shrink slightly as she watched Christopher LaRue enter the room before abruptly standing up to greet him. It was almost as though his very presence frightened her. I, on the other hand, was curious. I'd heard so much about him, and of course I'd seen him on the news here and there. Though he was quite private, whenever he did go out to public affairs, the press went wild for him. Why was he here? Was I that important? I also stood, for no other reason than conformity. He smiled at Dr. Madden, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm going to be sitting on this one, Maria. Please continue." He didn't even glance in my direction, let alone ask if I was okay with him joining us. I had known he was a reasonably attractive man, having seen pictures of him in the press a few times. But in the flesh, he seemed breathtaking. It wasn't that he was stunningly handsome, but there was something about his presence too. He took control of the room by simply being in it. He was tall, quite a bit taller than me, at least 6'2". He towered over Madden, but perhaps that was more because she seemed to shrink in his presence. I hadn't noticed her seeming so small before. I didn't let his being there intimidate me though, and I certainly didn't fall over my feet because there was such a powerful man in the same room as me. I turned on my heel and sat back down, pretending his presence didn't make any difference to me. It did though. The atmosphere in the room had completely shifted. What power I had held over Madden just moments before had been transferred to LaRue. In actual fact, his being there made my heart pounding with nervous anticipation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him watching Madden closely. He shooed her away from him, and she scurried off back to the table. He strode over and took a seat next to her. I was suddenly the one in the hot seat. I was shocked by the change in attitude from Madden. She had gone from open and emotional to on edge and scared. Her fear was contagious. But I decided not to allow LaRue's presence to affect me in any way, especially in the almost embarrassing way that it was affecting Madden. I sat up straight, relaxed my shoulders, and snapped at Madden. I want you to tell me everything you know. I risked a glance at LaRue, and to my utter bewilderment, I saw he was leaning back into his chair with his eyes closed. He was so peaceful that he could have been taking a nap, but I had a strong feeling that he was listening very intently. In fact, I could see the hint of a smile on the corners of his lips, possibly in response to my fierce confrontation. Madden didn't say anything. Instead, looked at him desperately, waiting for direction. After a moment, he nodded slightly. He had given her permission to speak. She fidgeted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable, but resigned. She cleared her throat and began. Miss Bennett, I believe you already know a section of what I know, but for clarity's sake, I'm going to explain as clearly as I am able to. As you're already aware, my dear friend Burnt discovered a pattern in the skies back in March that suggested his theory about gamma ray burst patterns was a lot more accurate than he and his partner originally believed. He'd claimed he had observed similar patterns a few times over recent years, but they appeared to be false calls. He was very poorly, and his mind was failing, let's say. This time though, his distress made me give it a second look, and I did indeed see a glimpse of the pattern that he had predicted. I alerted a team of some of the best astrophysicists in the world, and we met in Hawaii to further explore Burns' pattern. Well, it seemed it was there, and it was happening a lot more regularly than even Burns was expecting. It didn't suggest humanity was about to be obliterated though, which was what Burns kept shouting out to anybody who would listen. It was very upsetting watching him deteriorate that way, especially because it didn't matter how many times I told him that he and Carol, his partner, had been correct all along. He just couldn't remember it. It should have been a wonderful moment for him, but instead, he just got more and more confused. Madden took a moment, and I watched her closely as sadness and regret filtered through her professional expression. Yet again, my attitude towards her softened. Her voice was a little choked up as she continued. The pattern enabled us to predict that even though a gamma ray burst is highly likely to occur when the stars of a nearby binary orbit collide, it is still unlikely to collide with the planet. But the pattern Burns predicted is very interesting indeed, and opens up a great number of things for mathematicians to decipher and for astrophysicists to predict. The fact that we now believe that we know that a ray will burst from the stars, even though we currently believe it's unlikely to hit Earth, has intensified the chances that life here will cease to exist. And it is something to worry about, absolutely, because it isn't going to happen in hundreds of thousands of years as previously predicted. It will happen between 200 and 300 years from now. In the meantime, there is a very real and serious concern that will absolutely lead to the end of life on Earth. Climate change. We are at the beginning of the end, One way or another, the end of life on Earth will be seen in the next 300 years. Madden paused, waiting for me to gasp in horror or faint, I suppose. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully. So, I said, what are you going to do about it? Madden shook her head, perplexed by my lack of terror perhaps. I watched LaRue, still with his eyes closed, smile again. Well, she continued, there is only one option. We leave Earth, we colonize elsewhere. It's been the aim for many years now, and it's the only way forward for mankind, by building a ship, an ark, you can think of it as. We can try and rescue a large quantity of people from all over the world, and we can survive elsewhere while the planet dies off. Of course, not everyone will be able to go, but many will. How many people are you expecting to move? I asked, confused by the whole thing. It seemed even more unreal now than it had days ago. There was something not right about this whole theory. Several thousand. A sadly small quantity. But it's all we can do. We've had to fight to raise the money just for them. Is that why you told Ben and Lottie's parents that they would have to be kept away until it was time to leave? I interrupted. Scarcity marketing? The parents can go, but the kids can? They would sell everything they own to ensure the continuation of the line. How much did they pay for the ticket out of here? I hissed at Madden. The amount is irrelevant, she answered. You need to understand that without the sale of the tickets, there would be no way we can afford to build this ship. No way. We would all just die here, together. How do you expect to transport the chosen ones? How would you govern a new civilization? Could you even feed them all? The whole thing seems preposterous. I laughed. Well, that's where the technology Mr. LaRue and the other shareholders at BOS have been working on comes in. This isn't new to Mr. LaRue. She turned to him, clearly wanting him to help her out. But he didn't open his eyes. So he already had this tech ready. I spoke as though he wasn't in the room, even though Madden seemed to be losing a grip on everything simply because he was sat next to her. Her strong reaction surprised me. Why did this man terrify her so much? She cleared her throat again. Miss Bennett, Mr. LaRue has been working on this for a long time. He was one of the earlier modern scientists to start talking about the importance of action in the face of climate change. He was very vocal indeed. LaRue didn't react at all, even though Madden and I were discussing him. I felt unnerved by his odd behavior, but I didn't let it show. Turning back to Madden, I got back to business. So, you told some rich parents that they are buying tickets to get their children off the planet. They plunged a load of cash into BOS, so this ark could be built. The thing is, you never had any intention of taking their children, did you? So what was behind it all? What's the truth? Dr. Madden frowned at me, clearly confused. She opened and closed her mouth a couple of times, the suddenly gormless attitude making her look like a trout. I don't quite follow what you mean, Miss Bennett. Clearly not, I mocked. Let me spell it out for you. I know about the center in Scotland. I followed them. I know what you did. Of course, I didn't know anything. I suspected, sure, but I still believed I could have misinterpreted what happened in the Highlands. I was hoping that if my suspicions were correct, then I could shock her into a confession. If they weren't, then I could make her want to assure me that they hadn't killed anyone by telling me what they had really done with them. But Madden still looked totally confused. Scotland? She muttered. She turned to LaRue, who was now paying attention. He watched me with a slight smile on his face, either oblivious to Madden's growing panic, or simply uncaring. Mr. LaRue? Madden sounded desperate. What is she talking about? Why is she saying they are in Scotland? I thought they were being taken to Switzerland. I watched her question him nervously, her voice barely over a whisper. I thought they were going to be joining us during the first launch. LaRue ignored her, instead just smiling at me. He was acting as though Madden wasn't in the room. as it seemed to push her into a level of hysteria. "Mr. LaRue, I'm going to have to insist you explain to me what Miss Bennett is talking about," she cried. I watched LaRue's eyes flash from playful to fierce faster than I could blink. He looked straight at Madden with a complete deadspan stare. She visibly shrank away from him and shook her head apologetically. "Sorry, Mr. LaRue. I lost myself for a moment there. I'm sorry." He raised a hand quickly, and Madden jumped out her skin, but he simply pressed a button on the intercom. "Maria is feeling a little bit overwhelmed," he said smoothly to whoever was listening on the other end, his relaxed voice a contrast to Madden's panicked one. "She needs some time away." Then he leaned back into his chair and closed his eyes again. I watched Madden freeze in absolute terror as her eyes went white as saucers. I noticed that she began to tremble. As I watched, my own heart was hammering in my chest, but I refused to let fear overwhelm me. Unfortunately, Madden seemed unable to do the same. Please, Mr. LaRue, it's okay. I'm calm. I promise. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was just a bit confused. Of course, whatever is going on will be completely justified. It was foolish of me to think I would be involved with every step. I just misunderstood. Please, listen." LaRue just sat there, eyes closed, pose still relaxed, pretending he couldn't hear Madden's pleas. Then, the door opened and one of the security men came through. He guided Madden until she stood. She looked at me like a deer caught in headlights, her eyes pleading with me. I was confused and unsure what she thought I could do. She gave up on me, instead turning to the security man who gripped her arm tightly. "Let go of me, right now. I can leave the room on my own." But he also acted as though he couldn't hear her. He removed her from the room with ease, closing the door shut quickly behind him. I was in total shock. What had just happened? Who was the terrifying man I had been left alone in the room with? He opened his eyes then, and smiled at me again. This smile reached his eyes. I was unnerved to see him look at me, as though he were impressed with me, like I'd passed some sort of terrifying test. But I still refused to show any emotion. I wouldn't let him see an ounce of fear. I looked at him defiantly, and smiled back at him. "Shall we continue?" I asked. He laughed loudly, a bark that made me jump, but thankfully he was too busy pushing his chair closer to the table to notice. He leaned across the table to be closer to me. "You're good, Haley. Really good." I feel a little sick to admit that his compliment flattered me. Something about this man was very enthralling, and I was pleased that I impressed him. "You're very different to Maria." He nodded towards the door. "She's smart, don't get me wrong. She's just sucked into her own tiny area of expertise that she seems to miss everything else going on around her. The amount of times I've wondered how someone so smart can act like such a moron. Well, she bored me very quickly, but she had uses. You, on the other hand, you interest me. You don't miss a trick, do you, Haley?" I narrowed my eyes, wary now. LaRue was like a viper playing dead, luring you into a false sense of security while you got ready to strike. The man sitting opposite me was very dangerous, and I felt strongly that I needed to keep my wits about me if I wanted to walk out this building. The fear I felt was crippling. My nerves overwhelmed me so much that my entire body felt numb, so I was pleased when I managed to speak without my voice shaking. "Can we get to the point?" I asked, forcing my tone to sound lazy. He laughed again, clapping his hands together. I was disturbed to realize that this man actually liked the way I was acting. What did he say about who I was, if a man so terrifying had taken a liking to me? "Haley, we can certainly get to the point. I'm going to tell you the truth, not that rubbish that Dr. Meta thinks is the truth. You deserve more. I'm going to tell you the truth that only a handful of people know. It's really quite magnificent, if you can let go of your sentimental side. It's exciting, I promise. A bit scary in parts, maybe. But wow, it's so exciting. Are you ready to know the truth, Haley? Are you ready to know how I have guaranteed the survival of the human race? I've got to pause here. I know it's cruel of me, but I have very limited time, and I have things I need to do. I'll finish this soon, I promise. There will be more. I'd heard lots of theories, claims, and lies over the last week. But this time, I knew that whatever LaRue was about to tell me was the truth. There was an atmosphere of finality in the room while I waited nervously for him to begin. When I looked into his eyes, I found a sincerity buried somewhere beneath his predatory stare. One of his security men brought in unscrewed bottles of water. LaRue took a swig and noticed when I hesitated. He raised his eyebrows. Poisoning isn't my style. I find it quite cowardly. It's much more madden. He smiled nastily, and I felt revolted that he could find amusement in the death of Gardner. I took a swig of the water, hoping that it would make him stop staring at me for a minute. It was so intense that I felt like I was looking directly into the sun. He didn't stop staring, but he did start talking. Haley, if you had a choice between making the end of life on Earth easier on humanity, or turning your back on almost the entire population but giving humanity the chance to thrive elsewhere, which would you choose? I turned my back on him. I answered so quickly that I felt uncomfortable. Was there something about LaRue's insidious ambience that was contagious? Why would you choose that? I took my time with this one, trying not to act coldly. I think that giving humanity the opportunity to continue the next stage of evolution is extremely important. If I could truly help people, it wouldn't make sense to stay behind and die. LaRue nodded. I agree that it is more important to direct humanity into success than to lie down and fail with it. It was quite a jump from what I had just said, but the perception of a statement can tell you a lot. I didn't correct him, instead letting him continue. One thing that Madden is correct about. We are approaching the end of life on Earth. The gamma ray burst effect that got people to finally start paying attention in March is still unlikely to hit Earth. But being certain that one would occur certainly gave us a higher chance of extinction. While all these brilliant scientists were congregated, he sneered. They finally agreed on something that I had warned them about years ago. Humankind has less than 300 years to find a way to survive. This felt like a stab in the chest. Could this really be true? I interrupted without thinking. How sure are you about that number? LaRue tutted at me impatiently, a flash of anger crossing his face. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't sure. I made a mental note not to question him in that way again. At the time, I let myself believe that I wanted to get the best quality answers without pushing him away. But looking back, I can accept that I was scared of making him angry. I tried to divert his anger away from me. You said that Madden only thinks that she knows the truth. What's false about what Madden told me? With that, LaRue stood up and walked towards the door. I have some things to show you now. After LaRue had exited the room, I briefly found myself frozen to the spot. However, I knew I didn't have time to properly process what he was telling me, so I took some deep breaths to calm myself before joining him outside the room. I followed him through a maze of corridors until we arrived at a dead end. LaRue marched towards a gray steel wall at the end of the passage. Inside me, a ball of fear twisted in my stomach. What had I willingly walked into? He stopped just in front of the wall, lowered his head, almost as though he was praying. After a moment, he spun around, holding something black in his hand and pointing it at me. I tried my best not to jump, but I couldn't hide my nerves totally. He smiled amusedly and then showed me what he held in his hand. It was some sort of device, larger than a phone but smaller than a tablet. I need to ensure my security system knows that you're not a threat. He explained. You can leave it if you want. We can see what happens. He had a wicked glint in his eye as he suggested this. He scanned me quickly with the device, then held his hand against the wall. It shifted slightly into a new position, which confused my brain, like some sort of optical illusion. I watched with interest as LaRue located a handle and pulled the wall, which was actually a door, towards us. He held out an arm, urging me to enter before him. With a deep breath, I did as he wished. I was in a large room that had been painted a magnificent white, so bright that it made my eyes sore. In the middle of the room was the model of a spaceship, taller than me. The large cylinder replica completely dominated the area. My original design, LaRue announced behind me. He swept past me and pressed something on the side of the model, and it clicked open, revealing the interior. If only I could have taken a picture. The model had magnificent detail, with multiple sections throughout the ship that were very clear. At the bottom of the model, which sat by my feet, were huge tanks that could only be designed to hold fuel. Above them, there was what seemed like a huge storage area with massive crates. Next came a living area with various recreational rooms, a high-tech gym, a lounge with televisions and video game consoles, a library, and a study area. There were hundreds of small cabins that held nothing but 4 beds. The top third of the model seemed to be about ship control, holding lots of computers and screens. LaRue pressed something on his device, and to my amazement, the entire model lit up. Tiny versions of everything went into motion. I gazed at it in awe. I felt childish delight at being near a model full of so much detail. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I had to fight the urge to fiddle. Then, I felt LaRue's eyes boring into my back, and I forced myself to remember my surroundings. This really is incredible, I had to admit. But this means what Madden knew was correct. You are building an ark. She was right to believe that I designed a ship that could evacuate several thousand at a time. What she didn't realize, though, is that the design had changed a long time before she and her band of righteous martyrs had even heard about it. This ark, as she called it, well, there wasn't enough time for this to truly work, so I improved my initial design. He pushed past me and unclipped something before pulling out the entire middle section. There was nothing but fuel tanks, crates, and a control room with a large empty space between it. I was confused. Did you remove the living spaces so you could fit more people on? I couldn't see any other reason why he might have removed the dorms. More people. He laughed as though I'd said something idiotic, and I felt my cheeks blush. No, not more people. It's so I can fit in more of those. He pointed to the storage crates. I looked at him and frowned, confused. He smiled, obviously enjoying himself. Clipping back at the central part of the model, he began to explain. I was an environmental scientist before I decided to dedicate my time to engineering, and I told my peers and investors that we had to colonize elsewhere in order to survive. Mars, of course, is our only current option due to its distance and similarities to Earth. The idea of leaving our planet is disconcerting to many, but there hasn't been a choice for about 20 years now. We're past the point of no return. I told them that if they funded the design and build of my ship, then we would be able to continue the human species. I was greeted by a barrage of excuses. Too expensive, too far in the future to worry about. It'll be fixed by then, they insisted. He scowled as he spoke about them, and it was clear that he detested those who had impeded his plan. The absolute morons, of course. The damage they've done is unfixable. I told them that, but they chose not to listen. He glared into the distance, and I thought about what he had said. I'm not trained in science, but I followed the news, and I knew that LaRue's company, POS, had been heavily involved in Mars colonization. This sounded plausible, and I felt some relief at finally being able to accept what I was hearing. I knew that they were wrong, and so I buried myself into engineering. LaRue continued. I put my entire life savings, all my time, energy, and brainpower into designing a solution. In that design, this ship was unlike anything any man had ever made before. There were lots of challenges along the way. How to fuel such a large ship, how to land, how to survive. But the most challenging problem that constantly restricted me was money. I worked hard to keep the cost low, but of course, to colonize on another planet costs an astronomical amount. Can you put a price on saving humanity? I asked. You'd think not, wouldn't you? Yet, our entire lives have been controlled by money. The end of humanity is being caused by our endless need to profit, and our escape had been restricted by its lack of currency payback. With my design in hand, I once again approached investors. I told them if they started investing now, then we could have several of my ships ready for when the time came. We could save tens of thousands. And they said no. When I finally accepted how unwilling they were to actually do anything that would give humankind a chance, I also realized that their greed and stupidity would guarantee the end of everything humankind had achieved so far. I knew I needed to take matters into my own hands. We made for a door on the other end of the room. I followed him quickly, eager to hear more. I bumped into him when he stopped abruptly, turning and scanning me with his device again. He showed me the screen lazily, and I saw the measurements of my vitals. Why do you need to know this? I asked sharply, feeling slightly violated. This next room is dangerous. I couldn't allow anybody in an unpredictable state through this door. He also scanned himself, and I peered over, noticing his measurements were lower than mine. Seeming satisfied, he opened the door, and my mind was totally distracted from everything. We entered a huge warehouse, and everywhere I looked, something was happening. Constant movement, noise, action. But from what I could tell, there wasn't a soul in there other than LaRue and I. Everything was mechanical. LaRue turned to me, watching me to try and take everything in. In this room, you are looking at the future of mankind. This is my life's work, and it is the only chance humanity has. He smiled widely as he told me this, and his attitude sent a shiver down my back. LaRue walked swiftly through the large warehouse, and I followed closely behind. When all this business with Gardner's pattern happened, LaRue continued. Our rich investors finally accepted that the end was much closer than they'd allowed themselves to believe. They started to panic, realizing that their family legacy would be ending if they didn't act fast. They had the cheek to order me to find a solution or be replaced. I reminded them that I'd given them the solution decades before, but now it was too late. They told me to abandon my idea of multiple ships and concentrate on just three. 3 ships that would leave over the next 5 years and ensure their precious offspring would be the first lines to colonize our only chance of survival. I told them there was no guarantee that enough money could be raised after the first ship left, as it was likely to cause a significant shift in the economy. They didn't care, as long as their own had left Earth. Get them on that ship, they ordered me. I'd spent years working on these magnificent designs by then. He held his arms out at the machine surrounding us. To my left was a selection of robotic arms, building what appeared to be a small cave-like shelters at a high speed. To my right was a large drill that moved so fast it looked motionless. It wasn't until LaRue pressed something on his device that it slowed down, and I realized it had been moving. Next to it was a machine that appeared to be building a much larger replica of the drill. I wasn't sure what he was getting at, and I was momentarily distracted when I noticed above us that there were multiple drones buzzing around. I wondered if this was a security system. When I looked back, he was grinning at me like a wolf. I knew that the best chance of survival would require masses of machinery, artificial intelligence, and genetic laboratories. The more people you try to take, the less chance you have of surviving. And I knew that the move needed to happen soon, because 300 years really is not a long time. It takes a long time to travel to Mars, and return ships to Earth might be needed before this planet's demise. Though we, you and I, won't be around to witness the complete end of life on Earth. In our lifetimes, we can expect to see the beginning of mass migration, which will cause total societal meltdown. There will be riots, wars, deaths. With civilization already on the brink of riots and wars, I had no trouble believing that something like mass migration would push that into reality. How awful that I could so readily accept that in the final years, instead of working together, people would probably speed up the process by declaring nuclear war on one another. Why do we live amongst so much fear and ignorance? And why are the people around the world so eager to manipulate that into hatred? It's tragic that humankind could end in such chaos, I muttered sadly. Leroux scowled at me. Is it? He snapped. Or is it just weak? Humanity has been so greedy, so stupid. I warned them this would happen. I tried to help them. They refused. They were too busy killing everything around them so they could profit temporarily. If they had listened to me, they could have profited indefinitely. There was nothing to argue with, as Leroux was right. I quickly tried to keep him talking. What is it about these machines that will guarantee the future of humanity? Leroux gestured at the machine that was building a replica of the drill almost as easily as a children's jigsaw puzzle. The speed at which machines work is exceptional, as you can clearly observe. I spent a long time estimating the time it would take humans to create something livable on Mars, and it was nothing but a waste. By removing the living area in the ship, I was able to fit a host of machines that can do all of this in a fraction of the time that humans would be able to. How long would that take? I asked, trying to hide my discomfort at human lives being described as waste. He looked smug. Oh, only a matter of years. The machines would organize themselves to spread out to drill caves and plant farms. If there are any issues, they can be sent more instructions from Earth. I could do that from this very building. Eventually, it will be ready to introduce human life. And then you would send those that you have sold tickets to. I felt nervous approaching the subject, but I had to. My brain was telling me to remember the sort of person that Leroux was, because everything he was telling me was making too much sense. I knew it was important not to allow myself to sympathize with him, to get too wrapped up in his plan. I had to remember what he had done to Ben and Lottie. He ignored me though, instead continuing in his own way. I knew that the method to pursue in order to ensure survival would be to have machinery in control of pretty much everything happening on Mars. We have one ship built already, waiting in a secret location, but we'll need 3, another to take more machinery, more technology, and a last one to take the only humans who will survive. So you sold tickets onto the ship? I pressed again, determined to get a response. Why? To raise money to build them? Yes, and to make people work towards its success. People generally have no interest in something, however important, unless it involves them or their families. Humans are such selfish creatures. Misleading them was absolutely necessary. I found myself becoming increasingly frustrated with Leroux. What's the point in showing me all of this if you're just going to speak in riddles? My voice had risen slightly, and my anger was showing. Immediately, 4 drones flew in and hovered between Leroux and I. I could just about see my name and stats on the screen. Underneath was a button that said disengage. Leroux looked at me pointedly, his finger hovering over it. He seemed to pause for a moment before pressing down. The drones immediately flew away. Best not to raise your voice in here, Haley. I told you, you must stay calm. If I hadn't set you up on the system, they wouldn't have been so patient. He gave me a minute to relax, then carried on. The cost of transporting people is large, and I told him that so many years ago. I told them they needed to start investing in it, but they refused to because they were incapable of seeing the bigger picture. Now, the cost of importing machinery is also large, and if you had the choice to spend money on humans who would slow the production of a colony to dangerous levels, or to spend money on transporting technology that could do it in a fraction of time, which would you choose? Is there really any choice in any of this? Leroux laughed. No, of course not. It interests me though. I've been looked at as a monster for being prepared to do whatever it takes to ensure we can survive. Yet the monsters are the ones who got humanity in this mess in the first place. People are so quick to cry ethics until they're directly affected by it. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to save humanity. Surely, that makes me a hero, not a villain. He led me into a new room, and once the door closed behind us, silence filled the space. This room was worlds away from the factory scene behind. From floor to ceiling, every wall was covered with massive mahogany bookcases that were filled to the brim with books. There must have been hundreds of thousands of volumes. Ladders on wheels leaned against each bookcase, so access to all was possible. In the middle of the room was a large Persian rug, which housed a selection of expensive leather sofas and armchairs, a drinks cabinet, and a desk. On the desk were 3 large hard drives. Leroux made his way over, and I heard the chink of glass. But I couldn't take my gaze away from the magnificent collection of books. I eventually turned my attention back to Leroux. He was sat in one of the armchairs, watching me intently. Once again, he looked predatory, with something in his eyes suggesting he could pounce at any moment. I felt the urge to run, but there were 2 drinks on the table next to him, and I knew he expected me to join him. I focused on the beauty around me rather than the fear inside. I could spend an age in here, I said, taking a gulp of my drink, still looking around in wonderment. Indeed, he said. This room holds the absolute best of humanity. If you take everything meaningful that humankind has achieved and condense it into raw data, you can fit it on devices so small they can fit into a pocket. One day, artificial intelligent machines will be able to continue their research and eliminate the need for humankind themselves. I felt very uneasy about what Leroux was suggesting. In that case, you wouldn't be responsible for the continuation of humanity. You would be responsible for an age of machines. That's not my intention. I want to give humanity the chance to thrive amongst artificial intelligence. I want to give us a fair shot. Do you not think it disturbing that the privileged think they deserve the spaces out here more than anybody else? If there was limited space, then it would make sense to send people who could work to ensure survival, I said, almost parroting what Madden had said to me. There is limited space, and so it makes sense to condense everything down to its smallest form and send machinery that can set it up on our behalf. Don't you agree? I found it hard to disagree, so I diverted with a question. What if something goes wrong and no other ships can be sent? Like you said, the economy is going to be shaken. How can you guarantee that the machinery won't just end up left there, with no way for humanity to join it? As I have already said, those who have tickets purchased will indeed arrive in Mars on the first ship. My heart skipped a beat. Does this mean that Ben and the others are safe? Will they be going on the ship? I suppose it depends on what your definition of safe is. Leroux's eyes darkened, and I was reminded of how dangerous he was. Follow me. He took me out of the library into a laboratory. It had a selection of drawers that all had some sort of smart lock on the front of them. He stood in front of a set. The cost to build my ship and the machinery required to build a life for us was huge. 320 billion by any chance? I asked. Oh, what a good little reporter you are, Haley. It would cost that much to take a selection of people to Mars and some machinery to attempt to colonize. But there was a problem with that approach. The chances of the colony working were still slim. They were higher than here, of course. And so the mathematician said that we would definitely die here. And we would probably die there. The collection of academics decided it was worth it, simply because it was the only chance. It was risk it or die out, quite simply. But all of those brilliant minds together were still not as brilliant as mine alone. So what did your brilliant mind come up with then? I asked, desperately hoping that it didn't sound sarcastic. Words were failing me with the amount of information I was having to try to keep up with. He didn't seem to notice and continued. I let them think they were raising money for the original model of the ship. In the meantime, I had them working on the best way possible to survive. I've used the money to build everything you just saw in the warehouse, and all of my designs will actually give us a fantastic chance of survival. Their latest research will add a lot. So, you lied to them then, and sold people tickets onto a ship that they never had a place on. Oh, they have a place, Haley. He held his device to the drawer, and it popped open. He hovered a hand over it, turning to me before reaching inside. One of the things that angers me the most is that those cowardly little imbeciles only managed to raise the money when they believed they were ensuring their own line. Their privileged young would be the first wave of humans on Mars. They didn't care about the others left behind. They thought their wealth made them more important than all the rest of humanity combined. The academics had no choice but to watch valuable space being taken up by politicians' brats and bankers' spawns because it was essential to raise the money. However, I found an alternative solution, which fulfilled my promises without compromising the chances of humanity's survival. He pulled out a small glass case from inside the door and looked at me expectantly. "What is it?" I said, completely lost. "It's Ben." He grinned. I frowned at him, scared and confused. I didn't say anything. He rolled his eyes and explained. "This is the very essence of Ben, his entire DNA. Look how little space he takes." He looked at me, and I honestly think he thought I would smile back at him. That was one of the things that scared me the most. When I didn't, he carried on regardless. Ben, with countless others, will slip into the ship amongst the things that actually matter. Like mice in a mansion. They won't require sustaining, nannying, counseling. They won't decay whilst waiting for the perfect circumstances to thrive in. When the new colony is habitable, the machines will make them. Whether that is in 5 years or 100 years. You see, I am taking them all away from this dying planet. I am taking them on the first ship. I'm giving them exactly what I sold them. A ticket that guarantees their children will be the first humans to colonize Mars. A guarantee that their children will not have to witness the end of society. A guarantee that they will continue. I thought about the screams I heard from the concrete bunkers in Scotland. My suspicions, it seemed, were finally confirmed. LaRue seemed to be enjoying showing how brilliant he had been, with no trace of regret for the human cost of his plan. I was fast realizing he was a megalomaniac. My heart sank. So, instead of actually sending them, you're going to clone them? What did you do with the real Ben? LaRue looked petulant. "This is the real Ben," he snapped. "This is everything he is. He will be everything he was. Do you not see? There is no difference." His tone had gone from animated to vicious in one breath. "What did you do with the original Ben then?" I quickly backtracked, not wanting to irritate him further. I did not wish to see what would happen if the drones detected the sudden change of atmosphere in the room for a second time. "I think you already know that, Haley," he said quietly. "What about Nolan? What about Dennis Houghton? Are you going to kill them? The original them? What about you? Will you send your DNA? Will you go in person, as you are now?" "Of course I'll be sending my DNA. My machines will clone me when the time comes, if I am not alive to see it. Nonetheless, I fully intend on my original form being there within the next few years. Maybe on the second trip, more likely the third. I, along with a select handful or so, will be the only humans in their original form to step foot on Mars. Nolan had a place, though I'm not sure if that still stands. But that handful of people mustn't take precedence over the fact that I will be taking hundreds of thousands of people in their smallest form, that I can build when I'm ready to. There are still some things that confuse me, so I pushed past the ever-growing fear and remained professional. You have the most intelligent and wealthiest people on Earth working on a future that you are going to pull from under their feet. How haven't they figured this out?" LaRue looked bitter. "I suppose I'm somewhat underestimated. Not many know what I'm capable of. There are many specific areas that need to be worked on, and they get very wrapped up in their own areas. I do suspect that some of them realize my true intentions, because a few have suggested similar themselves. The genetic scientists in particular balked at the idea of sending just several thousands from already closely linked families. Imagine the inbreeding that would occur. It doesn't actually matter though. I am the only power in all of this. Those that had the ability to do anything waited too long. Those who did voice disagreements with my ways have been moved on, let's say. What it comes down to is the fact that my approach offers the best chance for humanity. There isn't time for sentimental outlooks. They didn't leave time for that, and that is not my problem. Did Ben and the others need to die, LaRue? Could you not have kept them underground, then released them once you left? I wouldn't waste the resources on them. His face held no emotion, no regret. I didn't think he was capable of feeling a scrap of empathy. It's bad enough that these parasites will be feasting on the new civilization. Letting this new generation of the delusional elite also continue to drain the last embers of life from Earth seemed unfair. But it's human life. Someone's son, someone's daughter. I tried to reason with him. As were all those that would have been left behind. Aren't you someone's daughter, Haley? I closed my eyes and shook my head, trying to shake away the confusion and moral contradictions that overwhelmed me so. I hated myself for the part of me that could see the sense in what LaRue was telling me. As I looked into his dead eyes, I questioned what kind of person that made me. I turned towards the door, wanting to be away from this madness. Just as I was about to walk away, I turned back and said, "You know, it might not even matter what you do, LaRue. It could very well just end up the same all over again, but on another planet. Humanity might be destined to die out because it cannot handle how fast things have progressed around it. Maybe this is simply how it is supposed to be. There will be one very big difference, Haley. I have total control. There will be no mistakes like have been on Earth. No corrupt governments, no inbred monarchies, no controlling religions. And I know what signs to look out for, and I will cut any problems out like a tumor. And I am inviting you to join me." LaRue pressed a button, and the drones flew out of the room. I buried my face in my hands in shock, and laughed out loud. "But why?" I asked, incredulous at this turn of events. "I want someone to log everything I've done. I want to be written about. I want the world I left behind to know what I've done for humanity. I want them to read it and weep. I want my achievements to be recorded. I want to go down in history, here on Earth, and on Mars too." I opened my mouth to try and speak, but couldn't. I didn't know what to think, let alone say. LaRue held his hands up. "I'm handing you the best choice of opportunities that a journalist could dream of. You can stay here. You'll witness the beginning of the end of civilization and get to break the story of how the world will end and my intentions for a future. Once I've gone there, there will be no more press blockers. You will be free to report. Or, you can pick the wild card. You can shadow me for the remaining time here, spending the days recording the work I'm doing and the nights learning to understand it. You can leave with me when the time comes. You can continue studying and recording throughout the journey. Then, you will start a new life on Mars. With me." I must have grimaced, because he laughed. "Don't flatter yourself, Haley. I am in no way attracted to you. This is strictly academic." He waved towards the doors then, as though he was showing me a way. "You have enough information now. It's time to leave. You have until next month to make your decision." As soon as I was out of the lab that held Ben and countless other dead people who had been at the very beginning of their lives, I ran down a corridor the opposite way of the warehouse. I ran, and I cried. Fear pushed me forward because the idea of drones creeping up behind me, one tiny pop, and it'd all be over, was utterly traumatizing. He could press one button on that device and I would be dead. He would always hold that over me, no matter what decision I made. I turned down endless corridors and eventually found an exit. I stumbled out into the night air, and I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. It was all too much. That was nearly 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry for being so flaky with my uploads. As you can imagine, I've had a lot to think about. In many ways, my hands are still tied. The police, government and press are no good because LaRue has too much power. I thought about running, just starting a new life and waiting for the beginning of the end, somewhere luxurious. I could sell my house before the economy drops, live in a hut on a beach somewhere. But the entire world is going to change, be it from the economy or the beginning of climate change. There won't be any escaping this. Not for any of us. I'm strongly considering his offer. There are so many negatives, of course. Would I always live in guilt for the people I left behind? Would any new life I build on Mars be lived in fear that LaRue would kill me if I didn't toe the line? Is that much different to now, though? He controls the people who run the entire world as though they are his puppets, and there is no escaping him. Would it really be much different on another planet? But who would not want to witness what must surely be the greatest adventure in the history of humanity? I could stay here and die slowly and miserably, or I could escape and see the new wave of evolution. I could go down in history. Maybe I could even become some sort of influence on LaRue. He isn't the only one who can play games. I tried to contact Madden, just out of curiosity. Her phone is off. She doesn't answer her door. I asked around, but everyone stays silent. The whole city is silent right now. There have been other suicides in the last week, and I'm sure there will be more. I haven't spoken to Nolan. I haven't heard a thing from him since I spoke to him while he was in Dover. He doesn't respond to my messages, but his phone does at least ring out. Is he alive? I don't know. From what I could pick up, it seemed Dennis Houghton had a ticket out of here for Nolan. But I know what LaRue's tickets are like. Maybe I'll see Nolan again one day. Or maybe he's with Ben now. When I started all of this, I believed that I was a good person. Now, I find myself constantly wondering if I'm as bad as LaRue himself. Over the last couple of weeks, my mind has continuously suggested to me that he made the right decisions. That all of the deaths are indeed worth the magnificence of what he has achieved. If LaRue is a monster, then maybe I am too. It's time to make a decision. Whatever the decision is. I'm afraid that I won't be able to update here any longer. If I decide to take LaRue up on his offer, then I will appreciate the need for total secrecy until I can break the story properly. Until it's the right time. And that won't be as a journalist. It will be a book about the life of the world's greatest mind. Because no matter how much I despise the way that LaRue has done things, I can't help but see how brilliant he actually is. Dangerously brilliant. But brilliant all the same. And if I stay, well, I don't think I would be able to go back to reporting about petty crime and local council corruption while I wait for society to melt down. Not after this. It just wouldn't do anything for me anymore. It all seems quite pointless. Everything here seems pointless. But maybe there is meaning. Maybe I can find something from all of this. Maybe one day there will be more.
Behind every normal family is a secret that could destroy it. Tonight, we unearth the dark truths buried behind closed doors. Let's dive in.
I married a man who washed his hands, like he was trying to erase a stain no one else could see. Water had always calmed me. The sink in our kitchen faced a narrow window, and on mornings when the rain slid down the glass in soft vertical lines, I would stand there with my coffee and pretend the world was rinsing itself clean. Caleb Wright liked those mornings too, he said. Rain made him feel sober in a way sunlight never could. He said it quietly, like a confession he didn't want absolved. I noticed the hands first, not the way they touched me. Those were careful, reverent even, but the way he washed them. He scrubbed past the knuckles, under the nails, wrists raw and pink. He'd dry them with paper towels instead of cloth, as if fabric might remember. When I teased him about it, he smiled and said, "Old habits, 12 years sober." He liked to say 12 years was a cathedral number. You could build a life under it and call it holy. I met Caleb at church, of course. He sat 2 pews behind me the first Sunday, sang without raising his voice, and bowed his head with a concentration that felt private. Afterward, he waited while people drifted away, then asked if I wanted coffee. He didn't touch the sugar packets. He watched me stir mine and smiled like it was a small miracle. We were engaged within a year. The ring felt heavier than it looked, a simple band that caught the light and made my finger look newly invented. My friends said I'd found a good man. My mother said he had kind eyes. The pastor said redemption was visible on him, like a sheen you only saw if you knew how to look. Sometimes in photographs, there was something else, a blur in the background, a shape like a shadow thrown by an object, not in the frame. I blamed the phone camera. I blamed my nerves. Caleb ran a logistics firm downtown, steel and glass, the kind of place where water fell in engineered sheets down the lobby wall. When I visited him at work, I'd sit in the atrium and watch the cascade. The way the water broke into white noise and hid conversations. He'd come down with a smile that was practiced but sincere, and he'd hold my elbow instead of my hand. "Slippery," he'd say, always careful. At night, he slept lightly. He'd wake before dawn, breathing like he'd been running. Once I reached for him and felt his body stiffen, a plank under my palm. "Sorry," he whispered, already sitting up. "Dream, I didn't press." Love can be a discipline. You learn what not to touch. The first time I saw the car, it was in a reflection. We were at a charity gala, one of those rooms where the wine glasses chime against each other, like wind chimes in a storm. I was standing near a mirrored column, watching Caleb talk to a donor, when the glass behind him went dark. Not shadow dark, road dark. A stretch of black asphalt cut by yellow lines. For a second, headlights bloomed, white and blinding, and then I blinked. The reflection was normal again. My face flushed, Caleb laughing at something, the donor's hand on his arm. "You okay?" Caleb asked later when we were in the car. Rain tapped the windshield, a polite, persistent knocking. "Just tired," I said. He nodded. His hands were tight on the wheel. The wipers beat a steady time. He didn't turn on the radio. When I started planning the wedding, water threaded itself through everything. The venue had a fountain. The florist suggested calla lilies that liked damp soil. I dreamed of rain the night before, not as a disaster, but as a baptism. In the dreams, I was always dry. Caleb volunteered at recovery meetings on Thursdays. He came home smelling like old coffee and antiseptic, a scent that clung to him until he showered. He would stand under the water longer than necessary, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. Sometimes, I pressed my ear to the bathroom door and listened to the rush, the way it filled the apartment and erased edges. Once, after he'd been in there nearly an hour, I knocked. The water shut off abruptly. Silence. "I'm fine," he called. His voice was hoarse. When he came out, his skin was mottled, goose-of-flesh raised. He kissed my forehead and tasted like nothing at all. "Do you ever think about before?" I asked him that night, my head on his chest, listening to his heart slow. "Every day," he said, without hesitation. "That's how I stay sober." I waited for more. He didn't offer it. The shadow followed us into joy at our engagement party, as people clinked glasses and made jokes about speeches and seating charts. I saw it again, a faint silhouette at the edge of the room, shaped like a crumpled car. It hovered near the wall, where the paint met the floor. When I looked directly at it, it thinned, like smoke caught in a draft. When I looked away, it gathered. I started to catalog my senses, as if I were inventorying a crime scene. The smell of citrus cleaner at church, the grit of sugar on my tongue, the sound of tires on wet pavement outside our bedroom window at night, my own pulse, loud in my ears. "Nat," Caleb said, using the nickname he knew I loved. "You're miles away." "Just thinking," I said. I could have said anything. Centerpieces, guest lists. The way the world felt thinner lately, like paper soaked too long. "Us," I said. He smiled, relief loosening his shoulders. He reached for my hand, then hesitated, wiped his palm on his slacks, and took it. The first crack in the story came from a woman with a soft voice and sharp eyes. Her name was Marisol, and she ran the church's food pantry. We were stacking cans one Saturday when she asked how I'd met Caleb. "At church," I said. She nodded. "He's been here a long time, 12 years, I said. Proud, like it was my number, too. Her hands paused. "That's right," she said, after a beat. 12. There was something in the way she said it, like a door closing quietly. That night, I searched his name online. I told myself it was normal. Due diligence. There were articles about his company, photos of him cutting ribbons and shaking hands. Then, on the second page, a PDF from a local paper's archive. The headline was old-fashioned, the font blocky. Head-on collision claims 2 lives. I didn't click it. Not yet. My chest felt full of water, pressure building. Caleb came home with groceries. He kissed me, set the bags down, went to wash his hands. I watched him from the couch, the way his shoulders rose and fell. The sink ran. The window over it showed the night, rain blurring the streetlights into halos. "Do you trust me?" he asked, without turning around. "Yes," I said. The word felt like a stone dropped into a well. The dream came back worse after that. Headlights, closer. A woman's face at the wheel, mouth open in a soundless O. A baby seat in the back, a blanket folded wrong. The impact was always just before waking, my body jolting, like I'd been pushed. I clicked the PDF the next morning, while Caleb was at work. The names were there, dates, a mugshot of a younger man who looked like Caleb if you stripped away 12 years of careful living. The article said alcohol was involved. It said prison. It said 6 years. It said Elena Rodriguez, 22, and her infant daughter. I closed the laptop and went to the sink. I washed my hands until they hurt. When Caleb came home, I didn't tell him I knew. Not yet. Knowledge is a weight. You learn how to carry it before you show it. We went to see the venue that weekend. It was by a river, the water moving fast and brown from rain. The coordinator talked about ceremony flow and cocktail hour. I watched Caleb's reflection in the glass doors. Behind him, for just a second, the river turned to road. "Are you sure?" I asked him as we stood by the water. "About everything." He looked at me, really looked, like he was measuring the distance between us. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. I wanted to scream. I wanted him to say it himself. Confession is a bridge. You don't know if it will hold until someone steps onto it. The shadow grew bolder after that. It slid into photographs, into mirrors, into the space behind Caleb when he laughed. It never touched him. It hovered, patient. At night, I started hearing water where there was none, a drip that wasn't the faucet, a rush like a distant shower. I'd get up and check, my bare feet cold on the tile. Everything would be dry. I went back to the article. I read about Elena Rodriguez. I found her obituary, a smiling photo, hair pulled back, a baby on her hip. She liked the beach. She worked at a bakery. There were comments from family, from strangers gone too soon. Prayers. I imagined her hands, flour, dusted. Her steering wheel, warm from the sun. The rain that night, slicking the road. "Nat," Caleb said one evening, standing in the doorway of the bathroom while I brushed my teeth. "If there was something you needed to know, would you want me to tell you?" My mouth was full of foam. I spit, rinsed. The water ran clear. "Yes," I said. He nodded once. He didn't speak. The week before the wedding, the rain came down in sheets. The river swelled. The news showed footage of flooded streets. Cars stalled, headlights like eyes above the waterline. I dreamed I was in the passenger seat. I dreamed my hands were not on the wheel. The night before the rehearsal, I found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., hands in the sink, water blasting. His shoulders shook. "Caleb," I said. He turned, water dripping from his wrists to the floor. His face was wrecked, the careful lines undone. "I can't," he said. "I can't do this." I waited. The apartment hummed around us. The fridge kicked on. Somewhere outside, tires hissed on wet asphalt. "I killed them," he said. The words fell heavy, undeniable. I was drunk. I crossed the line. I killed a woman and her baby. I thought of Elena Rodriguez, of her hands, of water and road. "I went to prison," he said. "I got sober. I tried to be better. I tried to make it mean something. Why didn't you tell me?" My voice sounded far away. "I was afraid," he said, "that you'd see me and only see that night." I looked at him, really looked. The man I loved. The man who washed his hands raw. The shadow pooled at his feet, darker now, shaped unmistakably like wreckage. "I see you," I said, and didn't know which version I meant. We didn't sleep. Dawn came gray and wet. At the church, the fountain burbled, cheerful and wrong. Guests arrived with umbrellas, shaking water onto the floor. In the bathroom, in my dress, I stared at myself in the mirror. Behind me, faint but present, the road stretched on. Headlights bloomed. "Do you want to go through with this?" the pastor asked, gentle. I thought of forgiveness, of atonement, of the weight of an unconfessed sin now confessed. Heavy still. "Yes," I said, or maybe I said no. The water was loud. When the doors opened, I walked. Caleb waited at the front, eyes shining. As I reached him, the shadow stepped forward too between us, solid at last. I smelled rain. I heard water. As we stood there, vows unspoken, I saw Elena Rodriguez in the reflection of the polished floor, her face calm, watching. The river outside surged somewhere. Tires hissed on wet pavement. Caleb reached for my hand. His palm was wet. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. The water kept running. The first thing I noticed was the heat too, much of it for a house that had been cold all day. Like the fire had learned how to breathe and was doing it just for me. The power had been flickering since noon, the Texas freeze pressing its face against every window, whitening the glass, sealing us inside like a jar. I dragged a chair close to the fireplace and wrapped myself in a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and the detergent my grandmother used for decades, the kind that lingered even after she was gone. The flames threw shadows that crawled along the walls, stretching family photos into shapes I didn't recognize. I kept thinking I heard ice crack outside, trees snapping under their own weight, but sometimes it was just the fire settling. Sometimes it was the house. My father sat across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was bracing for prayer. He'd been quiet all evening, not his usual distracted quiet. This was heavier, like something had finally decided to sit down in his chest and wasn't planning to move. "She wouldn't want you knowing this," he said, not looking at me. I watched the fire instead. "Then why tell me?" He rubbed his palms together, slow, methodical. "Because she's gone, and because things don't stay buried the way we think they do." Outside, the wind shoved against the siding. The lights dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. I thought about my grandmother, Dorothy Dottie Sterling, the woman who baked pies with latticed crusts, so neat they looked measured, who hummed hymns while washing dishes, who smelled like talcum powder in old books. Sweet, that was the word everyone used. Sweet Dottie, preacher's wife, preacher's daughter before that. The kind of woman you trusted with keys, with children, with secrets. My father finally looked up. His eyes were red, but dry. "She ran away in 1968. I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out wrong sharp, brittle. "Dad, she barely drove. She used to panic at left turns. That was after," he said. "That was what survived." The fire popped. A spark leapt, died. He told me to listen, so I did. And as he spoke, the room around me softened, the edges blurring like I was watching something old projected onto smoke. She wasn't Dottie yet, not really. She was Dorothy Sterling, preacher's daughter, Indiana farm girl with dirt under her nails, and a Bible always within reach whether she wanted it or not. Reverend Silas Sterling believed in order the way other men believed in oxygen. He believed the world was a wild thing that needed breaking, and his daughter was no exception. My father's voice stayed steady, but I could hear the strain in the pauses. He said she met him at a gas station just outside town. He said his name was Jax Mitchell, though back then he answered to anything said with enough confidence. A hoodlum, the police later called him. A drifter, trouble with a smile that looked practiced. I saw him without trying, leaning against a rusted pump, cigarette tucked behind his ear, hair too long for the times, eyes that didn't settle. My grandmother said, my father said, she said, that when he looked at her, it felt like being seen through. Not judged, measured. The firelight flickered, and for a second, the room smelled like gasoline instead of cedar. She told me he made her feel awake, my father said. Said everything before him felt like sleepwalking. I pulled the quilt tighter. The house creaked. Somewhere down the hall, a pipe knocked, then went quiet. The story slid forward, unstoppable. They left in the middle of the night. No note, no prayer, just a borrowed car, and the kind of certainty that only exists before consequences show up. Indiana fell away behind them, cornfields dissolving into highways. The radio crackling between stations. My grandmother, Dorothy, kept expecting God to reach down and flip the car, or for her father's voice to boom from the clouds, calling her back. Neither happened. That scared her more than punishment would have. They crossed state lines like it was nothing. Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois. The world got wider. Jax laughed a lot, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, told stories that bent at the edges. Sometimes she believed him. Sometimes she watched his hands and wondered what they'd already done. My father swallowed. The police caught up to them outside Springfield. The lights flickered again, harder this time. For a breathless second, everything went dark. Then the generator kicked in with a low groan, the fire flaring brighter as if pleased to be needed. There was a trooper, he said. Routine stop. Broken taillight. I felt my pulse in my throat, the fire's warmth pressed against my shins. Too hot now. In my mind, the road stretched empty and gray. Winter. Bare trees lining the shoulders like witnesses. The trooper's hand rested near his holster. Jack smiled. Dorothy watched his jaw tighten, a muscle jumping like it was trying to escape. She didn't know when the gun came out. She knew the sound. A crack that split the air open. The trooper staggered back, surprise frozen on his face, then fell wrong, like a puppet dropped by a careless child. After that, everything ran. Illinois blurred into a shaking ribbon of asphalt. Sirens wailed, a sound that crawled under the skin and stayed there. Jax drove like the road owed him something. Tires screaming around curves, fields whipping past. Dorothy's hands were numb. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip without realizing. He told her not to look back, my father said softly. She did anyway. The house sighed around us. I imagined red and blue lights staining the night, cutting through corn stubble and frost. I imagined my grandmother's face then. Not the soft one from memory, but sharp, desperate, eyes too bright, mouth set hard. The double-sided woman I'd never been allowed to meet. The chase ended in gunfire. A stand of trees. Orders shouted. Jack stepping out of the car with his hands, half raised, half ready. The shots came fast, too fast to think. He went down in the dirt he'd never planned to stay in. Dorothy screamed. Or maybe she didn't. Trauma edits things strangely. What mattered was that when it was over, she was alive. Bloody, shaking, and alone. She told them he kidnapped her, my father said. Said she was scared that she didn't know what he'd done. She cried. She prayed. She survived. The words sat between us, ugly and bright. Survived. Outside, something cracked. Wood splitting under ice. I flinched, heart racing. The story had reached its edge, but it didn't stop there. It never really does. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? Preacher's daughter. Soft voice. Eyes red with tears that came easily by then. She went home. She folded herself back into the shape expected of her. Married, had children, baked pies, learned to flinch at sirens and hide it well. She never told anyone, my father said. Not your mom, not me. I found out because of a box. I looked at him. What box? He hesitated. The fire snapped. After she died, I was cleaning out the attic. There was a lockbox tucked behind the insulation. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and a ring. My breath caught. A ring? Plain, cheap, men's? He met my eyes. She kept it. The room felt smaller. The heat pressed in. I thought about my grandmother's hands, always busy, always steady. I thought about how she'd sometimes stare out the window when the world went quiet, like she was listening for something far away. "Dad," I said, and my voice sounded thin to my own ears. "Why tell me now?" He looked tired, older than he had an hour ago. "Because during the freeze, when the power went out, I found her sitting by the fireplace in the dark. This was years ago. She thought I was Silas. She begged me not to send her back." The fire shifted, and for a moment the shadows on the wall looked like running figures. My skin prickled. "She called me Jax," he finished. We sat with that. The house groaned. The generator hummed. The storm pressed closer, as if curious. Later, when he went to bed, I stayed by the fire. The story had lodged itself somewhere behind my eyes, playing on a loop. I kept seeing that ring hidden away, a small circle of metal anchoring a lie that had held for decades. The wind howled. Snow hissed against the windows. I told myself stories about inheritance, about trauma echoing through families. I told myself this was just history, just a secret finally told. The fire popped again, loud enough to make me jump. In the brief flare of light, I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the room, hands half raised, smiling like he'd practiced it. When the flames settled, there was only the chair, empty, quilt slumped like a shedskin. I stayed there until dawn, listening to the house breathe, wondering what survives us and what waits for the heat to come back. The first message came at 2:14 a.m., and my mouth went dry, metallic, like I'd bitten down on a coin. "Sarah, it's Chloe. I think you're the only one who remembers me the way I really was." The phone felt heavier than it should have, a dead weight pressing into my palm. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake my husband. His breathing stayed even, oblivious. The room smelled faintly of detergent and the stale sweetness of the candle I'd blown out hours earlier. Everything was normal. That was what scared me most. I typed, deleted, typed again. "I remember." The reply came instantly. "Can we meet?" I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Somewhere outside, a freight train groaned, the sound stretching low and mournful across the dark fields. It dragged something loose in my chest with it. "Yes," I wrote. "Tell me where." We grew up in a Missouri town that barely existed. One stoplight, one grocery store, a post office that closed for lunch and never quite reopened on time. Dust settled into everything. Summers smelled like hot asphalt, and cut grass left too long in the sun. Chloe Henderson lived 3 blocks from me in a narrow house that always looked finished from a distance and wrong up close. The siding was freshly painted, but the porch boards sagged unevenly. The windows were spotless, yet the curtains never moved, even with the windows cracked. Her parents, Arthur and Martha Vance, were old in a way that had nothing to do with age. Arthur hummed constantly, the same 3 notes over and over, low and tuneless. I used to think it was a habit, something men did when they were bored. Later, I understood it was a shield. Martha smiled too quickly, as if responding to a cue. Only she could hear. Her hands were always busy, folding towels that were already folded, straightening picture frames that were already straight. Every clock in the house showed the same time, 3:18 a.m. Kitchen, living room, hallway. They ticked, but the hands never moved. Chloe was homeschooled. That was what people said, with a tone that implied explanation enough. When she came outside, she sat on the steps with me, our shoulders touching. She laughed in short bursts, like she was rationing it. Sometimes Arthur would call her name from inside. When he did, his humming stopped. Chloe's body would go rigid for half a second before she stood. "He doesn't like yelling," she told me once. "Says it echoes." The house smelled like boiled cabbage and old books. The air felt thick, padded, like sound couldn't travel properly inside. When I slept over, only once, I woke in the night to that humming through the walls, steady and insistent, drowning out something else. I told myself it was the pipes. That summer, we rode our bikes to the edge of town where the fields open wide. We lay in the grass and stared up at the sky, cicadas drilling into the heat. I dream about a store, Chloe said suddenly. It's huge, no windows, the sound in there. It makes my teeth hurt. What kind of store? I asked. She hesitated. One where everything is too bright, rows and rows of faces staring back at you. Plastic, smiling. I laughed it off. Sounds awful. She didn't laugh with me. The morning the FBI came, the air felt thin, like it might tear. Engines growled outside, doors slammed. My mother swore under her breath and told me to stay inside. I didn't. 3 black SUVs crowded the street in front of the Vance house. Men and women in dark jackets moved with clipped efficiency. The yellow letters on their backs looked unreal, like props. Arthur stepped onto the porch with his hands already raised. His humming was louder than usual, those same 3 notes vibrating in my ears. Martha stood behind him, gripping Chloe's shoulders, so hard her fingers dug into fabric and skin. Chloe looked at me, her mouth opened. Sarah, that was it. Agent surged forward. Martha screamed, a raw sound that didn't seem to belong to a person. Chloe stumbled as they pulled her away, her shoes scraping wood. The world felt washed out, edges too sharp. Cameras appeared from nowhere. Neighbors clustered, whispering. Someone said kidnapped, and the words slid off me without sticking. I remember Arthur on his knees, still humming, eyes closed like he was praying. I remember Martha fighting until they dragged her away, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder. I remember Chloe reaching back once, fingers stretching for empty air. They talked to me later twice, once at our kitchen table, once in a windowless room that smelled like carpet cleaner. They asked what Chloe said, how she acted, what I'd noticed. I told them about the stopped clocks, the humming, the dreams. The woman with the scar on her jaw nodded like each piece fit somewhere ugly and complete. They explained it carefully. Chloe hadn't been Chloe, not at first. She'd been taken from an Oklahoma Walmart 7 years earlier. A bathroom trip, a moment, a man who knew where the toys were. Arthur and Martha's daughter had died the year before. An accident. Martha had tried to kill herself twice. Arthur had decided that taking a child would save them all. They changed names, moved states, built a life that looked almost right if you didn't stare too long. Chloe was sent back to a family she couldn't remember. Arthur and Martha went to prison. Their house emptied out. The clocks were still stuck at 3:18 a.m. when the bank finally sold it. At night, I stood in my bedroom and listened to the distant train, to the echo of humming that wasn't really there. The diner Chloe chose sat just off the highway, a place people passed through without meaning to stay. Vinyl booths, burnt coffee. The smell of grease soaked into everything. She was already there, sitting stiffly, hands wrapped around a mug like it might slip away. She looked like herself, and not at all. Same eyes, same sideways smile. Something in her posture had tightened, pulled inward. Sarah. She stood too fast. We hugged, awkward, careful. They call me something else now, she said as we sat. But that name, it still fits. With you. Her leg bounced under the table. A fork clattered somewhere behind the counter. She flinched. They weren't cruel, she said suddenly, staring into her coffee. Arthur and Martha, I need you to know that. I didn't answer. The silence stretched. He hummed, she went on. All the time, 3 notes. I used to think it was a song later. I realized it was to cover noise, so I wouldn't hear myself. My fingers curled against the vinyl seat. They tucked me in, Sarah. Every night, read me stories. While my real mother was screaming for me in another state, her voice broke, uneven. How do I live with that? The diner hummed around us. A trucker laughed too loud at the counter. Life went on, indifferent. I don't think there's a right way, I said finally. She nodded, like she'd expected that. When we parted, she squeezed my hand. Hard. Don't disappear, she said. Most people do. After that, she called late, quiet. Her voice often came in pieces, sentences breaking off mid-thought. I went back, she said once, to the store. My stomach tightened. It's still there, the sound. It's not just noise, it vibrates, in your bones. I felt sick standing there, like the floor was moving. I imagined it, the endless space, ceiling too high, rows stretching on without landmarks, a place designed to erase time. Sometimes, she said, I think that's why it worked. why I went with him. Everything in there feels unreal, like rules don't apply. After those calls, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My husband asked if I was okay. I said yes. The word tasted thin. I started ignoring things. Dishes left in the sink, conversations half heard. My phone buzzed, and nothing else mattered. One evening, my husband touched my arm. "You're not here," he said gently. I snapped at him, apologized too fast. The look on his face lingered longer than the argument. The last message came on a Tuesday. "I think I know why I survived," Chloe wrote, "because someone decided I was worth taking." I stared at the screen, my throat tight. "That doesn't make it okay," I typed. The dots appeared, vanished. "No," she wrote, "but it makes it complicated." I thought of Arthur Vance humming in the dark, of stopped clocks, of love twisted into something that could cage you. That night, my husband fell asleep alone. I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, the glow reflecting off the window like a second, dimmer world somewhere. Far away, a freight train sounded its low, endless warning, and I understood, with a clarity that scared me, how a single moment in a place meant to swallow people whole could keep claiming lives, quietly, patiently, long after everyone thought the story was over. I was 26, the night I returned to my childhood home at 14 Alder Ridge Road, Westfall, Montana, to pack the last of my mother's belongings after her funeral. And from the moment I stepped through the door, I felt something inside the house exhale, like it had been waiting for me to walk back in. The air carried a metallic scent I didn't remember. My mother always burned cinnamon candles this time of year, even when no one came over. But now the place smelled like rusting tools, hidden under the floorboards. It clung to the back of my tongue, faint but insistent, the way the taste of blood lingers after biting your lip too hard. The house was colder than it should have been. I nudged the thermostat with my knuckle, but it flickered, then dimmed again. Maybe the power company hadn't fully reset things after the storm last week. I told myself it was fine. Grief had a way of making ordinary glitches feel sinister. In the den, I found boxes stacked in uneven towers, some slumped like they'd been opened and closed too many times. I knelt to sort them, rubbing a hand over my tired eyes. That's when I saw the envelope, yellowed, thin, and addressed in my mother's looping script. "Lena, don't ignore what you've inherited. He'll come for you when I'm gone." My breath stalled. It wasn't the words that scared me. Not at first. It was the shaking in her handwriting, as if she'd been terrified while writing it. Inside, folded neatly, was a brittle family tree. Every branch held names and dates until it reached hers. Where my name should have been, there was a blank line, like someone had erased me, or like she'd added me later. A patch on a branch that didn't belong, I whispered. "Mom, what the hell were you hiding?" My voice sounded small in the empty room. Snow thickened outside until the windows blurred into white smears. That was when someone knocked. 3 slow taps that vibrated through the wooden frame. I felt the sound in my chest more than I heard it. The wind didn't knock, and no one came this far on a night like this. I hesitated before opening the door. No one stood there. Only a Polaroid rested on the top step, its edges damp from snow. My mother holding a baby I didn't recognize. On the back, written with the same trembling hand, "My firstborn." My mouth went dry. I never had siblings. The next morning, I found another Polaroid slipped under the front door. The baby was older in this one, maybe 4 or 5, and behind him stood a tall man. His face blurred in a streaked smudge, as if the film couldn't capture it. My stomach tightened when I noticed the silhouette. Broad shoulders, long arms, a slight forward tilt of the head. He looked like me. I dialed my aunt, my fingers icy. When she picked up, her breath stuttered through the line. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I demanded. "There was another child." She didn't answer at first. Then, in a cracked whisper, "He wasn't supposed to find you. We changed everything to keep him away, Lena. You weren't taken. You were traded." A cold wave rolled through me. What does that mean? But she hung up. The silence afterward felt heavy, deliberate. That night, the knocking returned, this time above me. A slow, dragging thud echoed from the attic. Dust drifted from the ceiling in soft gray clouds. The metallic scent thickened, sharp enough that it coated my teeth. I tried to ignore it, Tried to tell myself grief was twisting reality, but the sound didn't stop. It grew rhythmic, familiar, like someone dragging something heavy across the rafters. Finally, unable to take it, I climbed the attic ladder, my legs trembling. The air tightened the higher I went, as if the space were shrinking around me. At the top, my flashlight beam cut through dust motes that swirled like ash, and I saw footprints, long, bare footprints, spaced too wide for any normal stride, leading toward the far corner. The rocking chair there swayed back and forth, slowly, though the attic had no draft. My skin prickled. A folded note lay on the seat. I forced myself to pick it up. "Your blood remembers me." I felt watched. Studied like someone stood inches behind me, breathing quietly, waiting for me to turn. I ran, down the ladder, through the hallway, out into the snow. I didn't even grab my coat. My breath tore from my lungs as I stumbled toward my car. I told myself I wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Not ever. But before I could unlock the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. A single photo. Me, standing in the attic. Taken from just behind my shoulder. The room in the picture was empty, but I felt the warmth of someone close behind me, as if the camera had captured something my eyes weren't allowed to see. I drove away, praying distance would break whatever was reaching for me. But distance didn't matter, because the metallic scent followed. I woke the next morning in my apartment 3 towns over, shivering despite the heater blasting. The metallic smell seeped through the room like invisible smoke. I checked my clothes, nothing. Checked my hair, clean. Checked the vents, just warm air. But the scent settled into my sheets, thick and unpleasantly sweet, like old blood left too long in the open. I hadn't brought anything back from the house. I made sure of it. But the scent clung anyway. By afternoon, I convinced myself sleep deprivation was distorting things. Grief did strange things to the senses. Maybe the photos, the attic, the note, all of it was igniting some psychological echo chamber. But even as I rationalized, my nerves thrummed like they were preparing for impact. Near dusk, a soft tapping reached my ears. I froze. It came from the far end of the apartment. 3 slow taps. My pulse hammered as I crossed the living room. The tapping repeated, patient, as if whoever was doing it knew I would answer eventually. The sound came from the balcony door. I approached cautiously. The curtains swayed slightly in the heater's breeze. When I pulled them back, the entire balcony lay empty beneath the yellow streetlight glow. Snowflakes drifted sideways in the wind. Nothing else moved, but on the glass, a smear appeared. Long vertical, as if someone had dragged a wet fingertip downward. The trail glistened faintly. I wiped it with my sleeve. Metallic scent bloomed instantly. I stumbled back, gagging. The taste crawled down my throat like it wanted to anchor itself inside me. That night, sleep evaded me. Every creak in the building felt deliberate. Every hum of the pipe sounded like a breath drawn just out of sight. I kept replaying my aunt's trembled words. You weren't taken. You were traded. Traded for what? By whom? Why me? Around 3:20 a.m. The tapping returned, not from the balcony. From somewhere inside the apartment, 3 slow taps, followed by silence thick enough to choke on. I dialed my aunt again. She picked up after the 4th ring, voice trembling. "Aunt Carol," I whispered. "Please, I need the truth." Her inhale shook through the phone. "Your mother? She made a deal she didn't understand. She believed she could bargain with something older than us. Something that wanted a child born with its bloodline. She offered her firstborn, but she couldn't go through with it, so she hid him, then hid you." I clutched the bridge of my nose. "Why would I matter to him?" "Because you share his blood," she said, "and blood remembers what it's owed." I heard something behind me, a faint scrape, a shifting weight from the hallway. "Carol," I whispered, "he's here." The line went dead. I turned slowly. The hallway stretched long and dim, each shadow feeling too heavy, too anchored. My breath came fast and shallow, fogging in the cold air. Then I saw them, footprints bare, elongated, trailing from my bedroom toward the living room carpet. They glistened faintly, as though wet. I backed toward the kitchen. The apartment seemed to constrict, walls tightening, ceiling pressing down. I could almost sense him behind me, the same presence from the attic, the same invisible weight in the Polaroid. I grabbed my car keys, forcing myself to move. But as I crossed the living room, the tapping returned, this time inches behind me. 3 slow taps on the floor. I bolted down the stairs, out into the brittle night air, slipping on ice as I ran for my car. My breath felt thick, metallic, like I was breathing in the same scent that clung to everything now. I started the engine and sped through empty streets, carved by plows hours earlier. I didn't stop until I reached the next county. I checked into a roadside motel under a different name. Every instinct screamed that if he could find me at home, he could find me anywhere. But I needed even a temporary illusion of safety. But illusions crumble fast. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric softener. Until it didn't. Within minutes, the metallic scent seeped in. Slow, creeping, familiar. I sank onto the bed, shaking uncontrollably. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Another photo. This one showed the motel room door, taken from the outside. A second photo arrived, my silhouette sitting on the bed. Taken from the window, a third dark grainy, showing the bathroom door slightly ajar, as if someone stood just inside. My pulse thundered, my vision blurred. Then the final message came. The trade is overdue. I dropped the phone. The metallic scent thickened until it felt physical, pressing against my skin. Outside, through the thin motel walls, I heard it again. 3 slow taps, the same patient rhythm that had followed me from my childhood home. The same reminder that blood, no matter how far it runs, always finds its way back to what it was promised. I was 27 when I stepped onto the sagging porch of 108 Sparrowgate Lane, and the house breathed out a smell I remembered, but could never place: damp wood, old paper, and something metallic, as if time had bled here. I stood with my mother's sealed envelope in one hand, and the new deed in the other, feeling like a trespasser in a life I barely recalled. The autumn light hung low, stretched thin, and in the silence that followed my footsteps, I had the uneasy sense of being watched by something deeper than walls. I pushed open the door, and the house greeted me with a groan that sounded almost resentful. Dust floated in the stillness like slow, moving snow. The living room sat exactly as my childhood memory held it. Brown couch, leaning floor lamp, faded rug, but everything felt too undisturbed, as if someone had pressed pause the day we fled and never came back to unfreeze it. I whispered, "Mom, what were you so afraid of?" But my voice fell flat, swallowed before it reached the hallway. The envelope seal cracked easily, the paper brittle with age. Inside was a single photograph, my parents in this very doorway, smiling stiffly, each holding one side of a little girl. A little girl who wasn't me. On the back, in my mother's careful, looping handwriting, "Our first attempt." My throat tightened. Attempt. The word tasted wrong, clinical. My parents never mentioned another child, no photos, no birthdays. And yet the girl in the picture had my jawline, my hair color, even the same dimple on her left cheek. I tried to draw a line through memory, 9 years old, grabbing my teddy bear as we left in a panic. My mother saying we couldn't stay, that the house was unsafe. But the why had always been missing. Now it felt like the house had been waiting for me to ask. I walked down the hallway, each step stirring the faintest tremor in the floorboards. They answered like someone pacing just out of sight. When I pressed my palm to the wallpaper, cold radiated through it sharply enough to sting. A sound rose from behind the plaster, a whispery hum, like someone breathing through old fabric. I pulled my hand away and told myself houses settle, that memory exaggerates. But the sound lingered. I found the basement door locked, a rusted padlock hanging unevenly. I tugged it once, then again harder. The lock didn't budge. Of course, I muttered, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. Why make anything easy? As I stepped back, a loose board nudged my foot. Behind it, dust puffed out in a warm, stale wave. I knelt and saw a hidden cubby, cramped and dark. Inside lay tiny dresses folded with impossible care. Children's drawings, all the same hand. Stick figures with circular eyes and crooked smiles. A music box shaped like a bird cage, its brass tarnished green at the edges. When I wound it with hesitant fingers, the tune limped out, off-key and trembling, and under it, clear as breath on my neck, I heard a child whisper, "Don't let them forget me again." I flinched so hard the box slipped from my hands. The melody sputtered. The whisper didn't. Footsteps thundered overhead, small, frantic, running in tight circles across the upstairs landing. Dust drifted from the ceiling beams like shaken snow. My pulse surged. I called out, "Who's there?" But the only response was a faint laugh, thin and close, like it came from just behind my ear. Panic pushed me toward the front door. The knob refused to turn. I rattled it, twisted, yanked, nothing. Then it turned slightly on its own, just enough to click, as if someone on the other side had grasped it. I backed away, breath shaking. A moment later, a fresh photograph slid under the door with a soft scrape. I froze before picking it up. It showed me standing on the staircase inside the house, taken from behind. I had felt no presence, heard no shudder, sensed no one close enough to capture something this intimate and precise. Fight or flight surged, and flight won. I crashed through the nearest side window, glass splintering around me. Cold air slapped my face as I bolted to my car. My hands fumbled the keys, and I nearly sobbed when the engine finally caught. Only when I reached the highway did I glance into the rearview mirror. The birdcage music box sat upright in the back seat, wound, ticking, waiting. I hadn't carried it out. I hadn't touched it. After the whisper, my apartment felt safer in memory than it ever had in reality. But when I stumbled inside hours later, locking everything twice, the air held a new weight, a heaviness that followed me like a small shadow with a long memory. For the first week, I told myself everything had an explanation: an overactive mind, grief twisting old memories, adrenaline distorting the present. But each night, without fail, the music box played from somewhere in the apartment, soft and wandering, like a lullaby sung through cracked teeth. Sometimes the melody came from the kitchen, other nights, the hallway, once from directly beneath my bed. I tried sleeping with the lights on. I tried unplugging every device. I wrapped the music box in towels, zipped it into a suitcase, buried it behind winter coats in the closet. Still, the song found me. Worse, now the footsteps did too. Small, quick, pacing just beyond my sightline. And always at 3:11 a.m., the exact minute my childhood memory faded into black. I started calling my mother's old contacts, desperate for anyone who could explain what first attempt meant. Most numbers were disconnected. A few people hung up the moment I said my mother's name. One woman, her voice shaking, managed, "Honey, you shouldn't open doors your mother nailed shut," before ending the call. By the 10th night, sleep felt impossible. I sat on my couch with a mug of cold coffee, watching shadows dance under the stove-light. My mind kept circling the same questions. Who was the girl? Why had my parents buried her existence? Why did the house feel alive? And why did whatever lived in it follow me? At 3:11 a.m., the music began again. This time louder. I walked into the hallway, heart pounding against my ribs. The tune drifted from the bedroom. "Stop," I whispered. Though I didn't know who I was begging, my fingers trembled as I pushed open the door. The suitcase lay in the center of the floor, unzipped. The towels were removed, folded neatly beside it. The music box sat upright, spinning slowly, and scattered around it were photographs, dozens of me as a child. But not the childhood I remembered. In some photos, I was holding the girl from the original picture. In others, she stood alone, smiling, while I appeared beside her, but blurred, as if I were the one fading. One image made my breath stutter, the two of us at age 6, identical except for her eyes, darker, empty air, a void pretending to be human. A fresh one rested on the bed. I picked it up with numb fingers. Me today, sitting on this very floor, reaching for this very photo. My knees buckled. I whispered, "What do you want?" But the room answered, with only a soft rhythmic tapping, small feet pattering along the wall behind my headboard. For days I avoided sleep. Every reflective surface felt like a doorway. Every sound felt intentional. My mind frayed at the edges, unraveling thread by thread. I stopped going to work. My phone died and I didn't charge it. I lived in the narrow slice of time between fear and exhaustion. Then, one morning, after a stretch of sleepless darkness, an envelope slid under my apartment door. It was addressed to Mara, but the handwriting wasn't my mother's this time. Inside was a single photograph, me as a child, standing between my parents and the girl who could have been my mirror. If you drain something vital from me. On the back, 2 messages, one in my mother's familiar script, one of you had to live, and beneath it, scrawled freshly, in uneven lettering still shiny with wet ink, I remember you now, Mara. I dropped the photograph. It stuck to my palm, as if clinging. I backed into the hallway and froze. The music box was playing upstairs, except I didn't have an upstairs. Slow creak spread across the ceiling, measured, and patient small footsteps. Pacing in the attic I didn't have. The sound grew clearer, closer, as if something was peeling itself out of the air between floors. A child's whisper drifted down, warm as breath. Come play where you left me. I pressed my back to the front door, gripping the knob hard enough to hurt. But something on the other side twisted it in the opposite direction. Soft laughter filled the apartment. Familiar now, I closed my eyes because looking felt dangerous. The last thing I heard before the lights flickered out was the voice, inches from my ear. Only one of us gets to keep this life. And then the footsteps began descending the invisible stairs toward me, each one slow, deliberate, and impossibly certain, like she already knew which of us deserved to stay. I was 28. The winter morning I stepped into 412 Marl Pines Road and felt the air press against my skin, like the house was trying to inhale me. The cold outside hadn't bothered me at all, but the moment the front door groaned shut behind me, an oppressive warmth settled into my bones. A thick, stale heat that felt strangely aware of me. I remember standing there for a moment, snow melting off my boots, listening to the quiet, too quiet. Even dust motes seemed to hang motionless in the air, suspended as if the entire place had paused mid-breath. My grandmother's house hadn't changed since the single visit I barely remembered. Wallpaper yellowed like old teeth, furniture lined precisely as though measured, the faint scent of lavender sachets mixed with mold drifting from corners. My mother never let me come back here. Some homes remember their mistakes, she used to say, with a tone that suggested the home was not the only thing guilty. I walked deeper into the hallway, running a gloved finger over a row of framed photographs, all perfectly centered, but none of them showed me. Not as a child, not with my mother, not with anyone who resembled us. Instead, faces I didn't recognize stared back, stern women, grim children, a line of people who looked vaguely alike but felt unrelated to any memory I owned. I tried focusing on the task, settle the estate, sign probate paperwork, pack the things worth salvaging, and leave before the early sunset iced over the road. My mind, though, kept circling the unease clinging to the walls, as if the house was evaluating me. Approving or disapproving, I couldn't tell. Upstairs the air thinned. I opened each door slowly, announcing myself out of some strange instinct. Just me, just checking boxes. My voice sounded too loud, like I was interrupting someone. In the hallway closet, beneath folded linens that smelled faintly of detergent and decay, a floorboard shifted when I stepped on it. Not a normal hollow creak. Something closer to a groan, like pressure forcing wood to move. I knelt down, prying up the corner of the board using a loose nail. Beneath it sat a wax paper bundle, brittle and yellowed. I unwrapped it with careful fingers. Inside was a document titled, "The First Will of Agnes Linden." The date was impossibly old, well before my mother's birth. Yet the ink appeared too dark, too fresh. My pulse climbed as I read the beneficiary clause, to Clara Linden. My second granddaughter, my exact name, but I was her only granddaughter. A faint tapping echoed from downstairs, not like pipes or settling wood, more deliberate. I followed the sound to the living room, where a rotary phone rested on a lace doily. It had no cord, no connection to anything. Yet, as I approached, the phone rang again, short, piercing, impatient. I lifted the receiver with trembling fingers. "Clara," a woman whispered, voice papery fragile. "They hid you from me," static burst in my ear. Then, another voice won. I recognized instantly from old videos of her birthday speeches. My grandmother. "Don't trust the one who calls herself mother." I dropped the receiver, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might shake the floorboards open on its own. I called my mother on video. She answered instantly, breathless. "Clara, are you okay? I found a will. It says I'm her second granddaughter, and there were voices on, Her eyes widened in terror. "Clara, get out of that house now." "What's happening?" "If the floorboards opened for you," she whispered, glancing off. "Screen as if someone stood just beyond view. It means she's awake." A heavy creak sounded above me. I turned slowly, staring at the ceiling as another footstep came. Slow, dragging, uneven. The sound of someone rediscovering muscles long unused. "Mom," I breathed. "Simona's upstairs." "Leave," she begged. "Please." But something in the house shifted, an old, unseen mechanism locking into place. The air thickened again, lavender curling around me with a sweetness that nearly masked the rot beneath it. A shadow stretched down the stairs, impossibly long, elongating before any figure appeared. I backed away into the dining room, knocking over a box. Papers spilled out, loose envelopes, some torn open, each in my grandmother's frantic handwriting. They switched the children. One was chosen, one was erased. Clara is not the one you think. A violent crack sounded above, the attic door slamming open. My body moved before thought could catch up. I bolted for the back door, slipping on the icy porch steps and charging into the trees until the house shrank behind a wall of dark pines. When I finally reached my car, lungs burning, I checked my phone. One new message, a photograph. Me standing in the living room minutes earlier, but in the photo, a woman stood behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder, her face older, but unmistakably mine. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The woman's face in the photograph, older, yes, but shaped from the same bone structure as mine, stared at the camera with an expression that could only be described as possessive satisfaction, as though she hadn't just found me, but reclaimed me. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, a glitch, someone using a filter to make a stranger look related. But the eyes, they were mine, but darker, sharper, knowing in a way I didn't yet understand. Snow fell in heavy clumps against the windshield as I backed out of the driveway. My hands were shaking so badly, the keys nearly slipped from my grip. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting her to suddenly appear in the back seat. The scent of lavender lingered in my coat, so strong it clung to my tongue. I made it to the nearest hotel in Elmridge, an aging roadside place with humming neon lights and a front desk clerk who barely looked up as I checked in. When I reached my room, I locked the door, pushed a chair against it, then stood in the middle of the carpeted floor, unable to move. Everything inside me buzzed with a kind of panic that doesn't let you collapse, because it keeps whispering that falling asleep will make you pray. I spread the photo on the bed. Up close, something else emerged. Details I'd missed before. Behind my older double, the wallpaper in the picture was peeling in a different pattern than it had minutes earlier when I stood in that same spot. The photo wasn't taken with me in the room. It was taken in a room that remembered itself differently. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother, Clara. "Answer me. Where are you, please?" I hesitated before calling. When she picked up, her voice shook as though she'd been waiting without exhaling. "Mom," I whispered. What did she mean? They switched the children. Who is the other Clara? Her silence was a small, agonizing eternity. Then, "I never wanted you to know. Your grandmother. She didn't want one heir. She wanted two. A pair. One to raise, one to keep for herself." The words tightened something deep in my chest. "Mom, that doesn't make sense." I was her only no, she cut in. Voice breaking. "No, you weren't." The heating unit in the hotel room clicked loudly, then began blowing cold air, despite the thermostat reading nearly 90 degrees. "I don't understand," I said, rubbing my forehead, trying to force my brain to stay organized. "If there were two of us, then where's the other?" "She died," my mother whispered. "Or that's what we thought. We left that house to save you. We stole you away before your grandmother could choose between you. Agnes called it the culling. I called it insanity." Lavender rolled through the room then. So sudden, so thick, I gagged. The curtains fluttered even though the window was latched. "Mom," I whispered, "she's here." "Don't look in any mirrors," she said frantically. "Don't let her match your reflection. That's how she..." Her voice cut out, replaced by static. Then faintly, another voice crawled through the line. "Second granddaughter." I dropped the phone on the bed and backed toward the bathroom, thinking I just needed water. A splash on my face, something grounding. but halfway there, I froze. The bathroom light flickered under the door, a soft, pulsing glow like someone was pacing just inside. No, I wasn't going in there. I grabbed my bag, shoved the photo inside, and unlocked the hotel door. But the hallway had changed. The patterned carpet was the same, but the walls had turned the faded rose-colored wallpaper from my grandmother's house, and the lavender smell was suffocating now. Clara, the voice came softly from the far end of the hall. I knew that voice, not because it had spoken aloud before, but because hearing it felt like recognizing a memory I never lived. A silhouette stepped into view. A woman, my age or older, hard to tell from the distance. She moved with a slow grace, her hand dragging along the wall, like she was steadying herself after a long sleep. I ran. The hallway stretched, bending into a shape the hotel had never been built for. Doors warped, becoming the tall, narrow doors from Morrow Pines Road. The lights flickered, strobing the corridor into a series of still images. The woman a step closer, then another, then impossibly near. I shoved myself into the stairwell and flew down the steps until the exit door burst open into the freezing night. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the parking lot, lungs tearing from cold air. Behind me, one of the hotel windows glowed with a soft lavender, colored light. I drove without thinking. Hours blurred. Towns passed as snow thickened across the highway. Only once I reached my apartment in Tacoma did the buzzing in my head begin to settle. I showered. I changed clothes. I tried to convince myself I was safe. But the moment I turned off the bathroom light, two reflections lingered for a heartbeat too long. Mine and hers. The lavender scent drifted from my vents at midnight, and this morning, an envelope lay at my door. To Clara Linden, my rightful granddaughter. I was 29 when I agreed to help my aunt clear out Hillcrest End Home, 603 Lanternwood Road, Brookdale, Oregon. And from the first step over the threshold, I felt something in that house was already aware of me. The air was colder than it should have been for a late autumn afternoon, heavy in a way that pressed against my ribs. Even the dust seemed unnaturally arranged, not random, but patterned, as though someone had swept only the spots they wanted me to step on. My aunt, Mary Ann, moved briskly ahead through the foyer, pretending not to notice the way the floorboards creaked under her with a long, reluctant groan. But I noticed everything: the faint chemical sweetness beneath the scent of wood rot, the tightness in her shoulders, the way the house felt like it was holding its breath, as if waiting to exhale until we were deep inside its walls. I tried to shake the feeling. This was just a favor. Family obligation. A weekend of sorting boxes so the property could finally be sold. But the family tree in the parlor stopped me cold. Its cracked glass reflected my own face back at me. My name, Emily, clean and precise beneath my parents'. But the branch under my mother's name had been snapped off. Not removed, broken. The jagged tear in the wood looked violently fresh, like someone had done it recently and with purpose. "Hey, this is weird," I said, pointing toward it. Mary Ann barely glanced. "We don't keep unfinished things on display," she said quickly, too quickly, and hurried out of the room. Her eyes hadn't met mine once. By evening, the house's chill had become an ache in my joints. While sorting boxes upstairs, I stumbled upon a stack of journals tied with brittle twine. My grandmother's handwriting slanted across the top one, for the one who was left behind. The phrase lodged in my throat. I opened the first entry. At first, the words didn't make sense. Rambling notes, dated decades apart, all referencing a daughter born minutes before my mother, a daughter given away at birth, a daughter claimed by someone else. My breath thinned. A twin. My mother had a twin. My grandmother had written of her, as if she were something that grew silently in the dark places of the family, and threatened to break through. I found Mary Ann gripping the upstairs banister, her eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond me. "Why didn't anyone tell me Mom had a sister?" I asked. Her hand tightened hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't ask about her. Some parts of the family, they grew in the dark. Your mother tried to prune the branch, but it kept growing back." Her voice shook on the last word. I wanted to push her, to demand answers, but a cold draft moved between us, and she flinched like the house had spoken first. I didn't sleep, not that night. The floor above me creaked with long, deliberate footfalls, too slow to be pipes settling. A faint lullaby drifted through the ductwork, a soft, tinkling melody, like a music box winding itself backward. Over and over, I followed the sound down the hall and found myself in the old nursery no one had used in decades. The rocking chair moved gently, creaking with a slow rhythm, as if someone invisible sat there, rocking with infinite patience. On the floor was a Polaroid, a woman who looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same tilt of the chin, but older. Her smile was pulled too wide, the corners stretching as if something inside her wanted out. On the back, in smeared ink, "The first daughter never forgets." I felt something shift inside me, fear cracking open like a fault line. My shadow on the floor lengthened unnaturally, stretching until the fingers looked too long, too thin. And then a second shadow appeared beside mine. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. The second shadow's head tilted just like mine, but I hadn't moved at all. I bolted, glass cutting my palms as I smashed the nearest window and leapt into the yard. I heard the lullaby behind me, quieter now, like it was retreating only because it knew it didn't have to chase. By the time police arrived, the journals were gone, completely gone. The family tree lay shattered on the floor, names crossed out, rearranged with fresh ink that hadn't been there hours earlier. Mary Ann insisted we must have broken it ourselves. Her voice was too calm, her face too pale. I didn't argue, I just left. The next morning, a thin white envelope rested at my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid of me sleeping, my hair spread across my pillow, my face relaxed. I would have believed it was a selfie taken while half asleep. Except I hadn't taken it, and except for the figure in the photo beside me, a woman with my face, my eyes, my mouth. Her head resting on my pillow as though she lived there, as though she belonged there. On the back, the missing branch has grown back. Make room. Part 2. 750 words. I didn't remember coming inside the apartment the night before. My coat was draped neatly on the hook, my boots arranged side by side, and the lights were dim to the soft setting I only used when I read before bed. But I hadn't been reading. I'd spent the night clutching a steering wheel, driving in circles around town, until the sky cracked with the first pale streaks of dawn. Yet, the apartment felt used, lived in, by someone who'd done the things I was too shaken to remember. I locked the door with trembling fingers. Every sound inside the apartment took on sharp edges. The refrigerator hum deepened, until it sounded like a low growl. The ticking of the wall clock stalled, resumed, then stalled again. The heater vent coughed out a single warm breath, as if clearing its throat. I kept replaying the Polaroid in my mind, the woman with my face, lying beside me like she had every right to be there. I checked my bedroom. The sheets were cool, untouched. I stripped the bed, checking the seams, the frame, the underside of the box spring. Nothing. No sign of anyone but me. Still, the air felt different, heavy, claimed. The apartment's narrow hallway was lined with framed photos. My childhood birthdays, college graduation, last year's trip to Denver. When I brushed past them, I froze. Something was off. In the picture from my 6th birthday, my father's hand rested on my shoulder, but the angle of his hand had changed. Instead of lying flat, his fingers curled, slightly gripping my shirt. I blinked hard, leaning in. The photo grain shifted faintly, like it was still settling. "That's not real," I whispered to myself. "You're just tired." But a memory surfaced then, uninvited. My mother brushing my hair when I was small, murmuring, "You were meant to be alone, sweetheart. Some children should never meet their mirrors." I had never understood what she meant. I'd assumed she was talking about cousins I never met. But what if a soft tapping interrupted my thoughts? 3 gentle taps on the hallway wall. Not the door, the wall. I pressed my palm flat against the cool paint, holding my breath. Another tap directly opposite my hand. Like someone tapping back, my fingers recoiled. I tried to steady myself. I wasn't a frightened child. I wasn't losing my mind. There had to be a logical explanation. Stress, hallucination, exhaustion, anything, but the idea forming at the edges of my thoughts. The missing twin, raised in the dark by someone who believed she belonged elsewhere. A sister who looked like me. A sister who felt entitled to return. A sister who apparently had never stopped watching. I moved from room to room, turning on every light. The brightness helped only a little. Shadows still pooled under the furniture, too dark for midday. I sat on the couch with the Polaroid, studying the edges. Something about the figure beside me unnerved me more than her resemblance. Her body was angled toward mine, head tilted with unsettling tenderness. As if she had been whispering into my sleeping ear. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. You slept so peacefully. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the hardwood. My breath stuttered. I typed back with shaking fingers. Who is this? The response came instantly. Your other half. My vision tunneled. The apartment walls seemed to narrow, bending inward as though reacting to the text. The tapping resumed, this time from inside the bedroom. A slow, rhythmic knock on the back of my closet door. I backed away, pulse hammering. The door creaked open by itself, inch by inch, revealing hanging clothes swaying gently. Though there was no draft, a voice, my voice, whispered from the dark. I've been here longer than you think. I stumbled toward the front door, fumbling with the lock, desperate to leave. But a second breath exhaled behind me, warm, close, too close. I froze. 2 sets of breathing filled the apartment, mine fast and shallow, the other slow and steady, as if it were savoring the moment. I ran, bolted down the stairs, out into the raw air. I didn't know where I was going, just away. But as I reached the parking lot, I caught sight of a figure in the reflection of a car window. A woman standing behind me, my height, my posture, my face. Smiling that too, wide smile I'd seen in the Polaroid. When I spun around, there was no one there. I don't remember getting back inside. I don't remember locking the door. The apartment is quiet now, too quiet. The kind of quiet that listens. But I know I'm not alone. I can feel her in the walls, in the mirrors, in the air when I breathe. And as I write this, I hear it again. 2 sets of breathing. One of them is mine. The other is waiting for me to fall asleep.